is moving dangerously closer. Trump says Tehran wants to negotiate, but has also given Iran a direct deadline to accept a deal he considers as fair and just, including a deal in which the regime gives up its nuclear weapons. This is the goal for Donald Trump, and according to the American president, failure to agree to a deal will lead to military action. Let's take a listen to some of Trump's latest remarks on this matter.
Are you giving Iran any kind of deadline to make a deal before potentially taking
Only
military
they
action?
know for sure.
Have you communicated that to them
Yeah,
directly?
I have.
We could make a negotiated deal that would be satisfactory with no nuclear weapons. They said they should do that, but I don't know that they will. But they are talking to us, seriously talking to us.
Trump also added that an armada is on its way to Iran. A U.S.-guided missile destroyer was spotted this morning off of the coast of the port of Eilat in southern Israel. As additional naval and air assets move into the region, all this signals that Washington is positioning for rapid action should the ongoing talks collapse. But the regime, well, they are threatening back. Ayatollah Khamenei said this morning that if the United States were to open a war front against Iran, the escalation would be regional. What's more, new satellite images reveal that the regime is attempting to salvage its nuclear materials from sites damaged in last year's Israeli and U.S. strikes. Images now on your screen show new roofs built over destroyed structures at the Natanz and Isfahan nuclear facilities, the first significant activity there since the 12-day war with Iran last June. Experts say the roofs are not part of reconstruction, but a deliberate effort to block satellite surveillance, while Iran assesses whether critical assets, including stocks of highly enriched uranium, survived the strikes. Iran has barred International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors from the sites, leaving satellite imagery as the only way to monitor activity on the ground. Tehran has yet to comment on these photos. And so, the crossroads thus far. Tehran and Washington are signaling willingness to negotiate, but cannot seem to agree on terms. Otherwise, we would have likely seen a regression of U.S. warships and an announced deal. But while the two nations discuss their options, both send regular threats that should an escalation or attack occur, both have made clear that neither will be holding back. Any escalation will drag the entire region, including Israel, into another war against the Islamic regime in Iran. Now, here to help us break down where we stand is Azriel Bermant, senior researcher at the Institute of International Relations of Prague. Azriel, thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure.
So everyone here in Israel, wants to know, when will the strike from Iran happen? People, they want to prepare, they want to know, but there are literally no clear answers on this issue. And on the one hand, it seems like the further away that we get from the mass protests that took place in Iran, and obviously the subsequent murder of these thousands of protesters, and that the less likely it is that Trump will order a strike. But on the other hand, we also wait to see when Trump will decide that negotiations are going nowhere and diplomacy doesn't work and doesn't do the trick anymore, therefore warranting a strike on the Islamic regime. So what is your assessment of this, sort of game of limbo that we're playing?
Well, there have been some signs that President Trump may be looking for an off-ramp, hence the talk about the fact he's saying that the Iranians are looking, they're talking about nuclear deal, they're negotiating. Of course, we don't know how far they really are willing to do so. But this is, in a way, maybe reminiscent of the height of the protests against the regime, when Trump promised he would take action, and then at the last minute said that the regime's promised not to execute protesters, and that was kind of his way out. So at the moment, we know that Turkey has been holding talks. The Turkish foreign minister met with the Iranian foreign minister on Friday, and there's clearly strong regional efforts. Saudis, the Egyptians, Oman, Qatar, all are very keen to see some kind of diplomatic solution, and they're pressuring both the Iranians and the Trump administration to try and get back to the negotiating table.
It really seems like nobody wants this sort of, war to ensue or a strike to happen. Nobody wants to drag the region into war, but this takes us back to the nuclear issue because Trump seems very adamant to negotiate with Iran over their nuclear weapons. And in Israel, there are actually growing worries that Trump could negotiate a deal with the regime that would only cover the issue of nuclear weapons and not the ballistic missile program, which in effect is really the biggest threat to Israel. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that Trump could end up just being consumed by this nuclear threat to ignore the ballistic missiles?
There's two issues here. First of all, we need to be realistic. I cannot see any way in which the Islamic Republic of Iran would be willing to negotiate their ballistic missiles. And we know it's pretty clear that they have tried to, they have made efforts to try and reconstitute their missile program. The missiles of Iran, it's vital for in their eyes, for their survival. So I simply cannot. I don't believe the regime would sign any deal on their missiles. In fact, and as for the nuclear program, again, I cannot see any way in which the regime would agree to give up their nuclear program. But I can see some kind of willingness to maybe return to some kind of nuclear deal time for the regime. The question is, how far would they be willing to compromise? For example, the issue of inspections. We know that there's been a problem with it. They would refuse to allow the inspections to resume, and that will be a sticking point, for example. So I think on that front, there may be room for bargaining in terms of a nuclear deal, but certainly not the sort of deal that maybe the Netanyahu government is hoping for.
Mm-hmm. And when you say that there may be room to negotiate, I mean, this is very reminiscent to me of, as you can recall, there has been a round of negotiations regarding Iran's nuclear capabilities before the previous strike in June, as I mentioned. There were already talks and negotiations between Tehran and Washington to try and close these gaps and come to some sort of agreement. So what would be different this time around? I mean, wouldn't the regime's insistence on having nuclear capabilities further warrant a strike by the United States and not inspire diplomacy?
Well, you also need to, I mean, we were talking about a president who's, been boasting about the fact he claims he's ended 8 wars in 8 months. It wouldn't look very good for him if he was to start, make a reach. I mean, we just heard the Iranian Supreme Leader warn that this war would not be like the previous war. It would be a full-on regional war. And he's obviously trying to, put the frighteners on President Trump. And this is clearly there are concerns for him going down that front, and also his base. After all, he came to power, again, in the wake of the originally first time around, his first term. The Americans are tired of fighting wars. So we know that the Trump administration wants to weaken the regime, attack the regime without bringing about a major war in the region. But I don't know if that's easier said than done. So that's why it might be for President Trump, the idea of some kind of negotiation would be appealing for him, but that also has risks, of course, because it would have to be an agreement which would not give loopholes, which would not allow the Iranians to return to enrichment, and there would have to be inspections, return of inspectors, and it would not be straightforward. The Iranians are very clever when it comes to negotiations. It would. So either, both counts, there are risks for the Trump administration, but certainly a military force has, immediately speaking, does carry a lot of problems for him.
So there's risks to negotiating, there's risks striking as well. And, you know, if you could play fortune teller for a moment here, how do you predict the next few days or even weeks could unfold?
Well, you know, if you, I mean, we mentioned, for example, the satellite. I mean, if there were, for example, more were to come to light of the clear evidence that the Iranians are trying to restart the nuclear program, that would put pressure. That would put pressure on the Americans to act, in my view. But at the same time, I think that you know, for the United States has, you know, its allies in the region are very concerned about you know, the dangers of a war, and I think that that might be a big part of the reason why right now President Trump is maybe talking about you know, trying to find some kind of deal. You know, we were seeing, as I've mentioned, there is the diplomatic process is very much. We've seen intensified diplomatic meetings to try and find a way out. But you know, at the same time, as I said, if there is something that comes to light, that could you know, certainly that might be something which could lead to a resumption of the talking about military force. But you know, there are a lot of things to weigh up. There's also, of course, all sorts of what's going on the domestic front in Minneapolis and all of that. Some say that it's, you know, the Iran issue is a convenient distraction. On the other hand, if military force were to be reused and we end up having, you know, you have you know, a lot of Americans killed, for example, and you know, Iran causes mayhem in the region, then that may not look good for Trump. So I do think that he may try to find a way out, but of course, with President Trump, you never know. And the fact that he used force against him, went on the attack last June, the fact that he authorized a strike on Soleimani in 2019, I mean, 2020, sorry, you know, Trump is prepared to shoot from the hip, but he's also not prepared to get himself into a long-term military confrontation. So, and that is a risk for him. It's all very nice to shoot from the hip, but he doesn't want to get involved in a protracted war.
Absolutely. And, you know, we are almost out of time, but before I do let you go, I just have one more question. Diplomacy seems to be favored at the moment, both for Trump and for the Islamic regime in Iran. But say that is the path that we do end up taking and there is no strike. Is that not a stab in the back for the people of Iran after promising that help was on the way and then not delivering?
Well, President Trump was over Hastings in promising action, and when he failed to do so, certainly we know that there are a lot of protesters, many protesters, put themselves on the line in the hope that the United States would intervene, and we know there were a lot of talk of betrayal in the wake of this promise that, you know, but at the same time we had Marco Rubio, U.S. Secretary of State, saying last week that regime change, you know, that this is a regime that's been around a long time. It's not something you can do one moment to the next. It's all very, you know, the use of military force. I mean, in Israel and I think in the United States, it is accepted that carrying, you know, aerial strikes on the regime isn't going to lead in and of itself to a removal of the regime of the Ayatollahs. It's something that, you know, it's not something that will happen from one day to the next. So I'm not sure how much of a difference it will really make, you know, this kind of action that we're talking about, especially because, as I said, I don't think President Trump wants to get embroiled in a very long, protracted military struggle with the Iranians.
Azriel Berman, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your analysis. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And the IDF has released footage of the dismantling of a terror tunnel in Khan Yunis by the Yellow Line. The tunnel contained dozens of weapons, including RPGs, grenades, rifles, and more, 3 living quarters, and stretched hundreds of meters, according to the military. Troops of the 188th Armored Brigade and Yahalom unit dismantled the tunnel, eliminating the threat and disposing of the weapons hidden inside. This after a weekend development that saw 32 Palestinians killed in IDF airstrikes targeting Hamas gunmen who emerged from a tunnel near Rafah. According to the army, 3 of the gunmen were killed, a senior Hamas commander was captured, and the incident triggered a broader operation against terror infrastructure. And while the Gaza fighting continues despite the ongoing ceasefire agreement, today the IDF is preparing to open the Rafah border crossing, as promised, symbolizing the official transformation into Phase 2. Foreign aid trucks and ambulances were seen piling up by the border crossing this morning, waiting to enter the Strip, as Israel and Egypt work to ensure the crossing is used lawfully. The crossing will not be open for the transfer of goods or aid, as the Rafah crossing has been a notorious hotspot for weapons smuggling from Egypt into the Gaza Strip for 2 decades, an issue the IDF is attempting to monitor closely. Instead, only Gazans who previously left the Strip, so medical patients, dual citizens, and others, will be permitted to return after undergoing security screenings at an IDF checkpoint. With the NCAG, or the technocratic Palestinian body, set to govern Gaza and replace Hamas, well, they have no official entry date, so Rafah will be open and Hamas will still be in charge. And joining me now to discuss these Gaza developments is Itamar Marcus of Palestinian Media Watch. Itamar, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
So the report I just gave on the Rafah border crossing opening and the other report I gave of the deadly escalations, they seem so detached. It's like 2 different realities on the ground. How do you explain this disconnect between, on the one hand, the desire to open Rafah and move to Phase 2, but on the other hand, the reality, which is that Hamas is still very much armed and very much in control in Gaza?
You're absolutely right. There's a complete disconnect between the reality, what was promised with the agreement, and what's actually happening in Gaza, and that's so critical. And one of the reasons this is happening, let's go back to the basics. Trump and the whole plan was built around 3 different groups of people. The first one is his Board of Peace, which is headed by Trump and has on it lots of world leaders, also Marco Rubio and Witkoff. And many people see this as he's trying to create a replacement for the United Nations. This would be a body that would resolve international conflicts, not just in Gaza, but around the world. So he's thinking very, very large with this Board of Peace. The second thing, the second thing is the International Stabilization Force. Now, this was the military force that was supposed to come in and accomplish just what you were talking about now, which is take away Hamas's weapons, make sure that all the tunnels are destroyed, fight Hamas if necessary. And the interesting thing is, and not surprising, is that no countries want to join this International Stabilization Force. No countries want to put their soldiers in Gaza to be responsible for fighting Hamas, which is essentially what they'd have to do. So that when you're talking about now the terrorists coming out of tunnels, and you're talking about the incredible infrastructures that still exist, the body that was supposed to be created under the peace agreement just isn't being created because no one wants to be a part. No country wants to be a part that Israel will allow. Certainly Turkey and Qatar would like to be a part. Israel won't allow those countries because it will be a farce.
Right, and so there's really, like you say, this big disconnect. And I'm curious, why is the IDF facilitating and allowing for the opening of Rafah? I mean, it's very clear to everybody here in Israel that this is a bad move. We're doing it with our heads down. There seems to be this big rush to move on to Phase 2, but Hamas are still there. They're still popping out of tunnels, and they're still armed. So the minute we open the Rafah crossing, we get more weapons smuggling from Egypt until the technocratic government comes in and does what they're supposed to do, which is disarm Hamas, which is yet to be seen whether or not they'll be successful or not. Before they even attempt to. We're going to have a few days where the Rafah crossing is open and Hamas are still there. So what do these few days do to Hamas, and what is the danger for Israel?
Well, Israel went along with the opening of Rafah because, as opposed to many of the different things in the 20-point plan, Trump's 20-point plan, as opposed to many things which talked about a progression, the opening of Rafah actually had a specific date. I think it was January 19th, and that date we've passed already. So Israel didn't want to be seen as the one that is causing the whole process to stop. Now, the United States is very interested in going on to phase two because they don't want the process to stop either. Because Trump has been presenting himself internationally as the peacemaker. You know, there's no doubt he's talked about the Nobel Peace Prize, and if it all falls apart right now, even before it gets started, then it's a failure. So he wants to see it going, continuing going. Israel is an ally of the United States, and the same way the United States helps Israel, Israel helps the United States. And in this case, that means opening the Rafah border and allowing a process to continue, even though it's even though it's missing a fundamental piece. So it's sort of something we're doing for the United States. Now, just recognize this is supposed to be only civilians going back and forth. In the meantime, it's not supposed to have any goods. No trucks are going to be going back and forth with supplies. So that the fear of this becoming what it was in the past, an avenue to bring in weapons for Hamas, that's not going to happen right now. And I don't think Israel would ever allow that to happen. But like I said, it's important for Israel to be an ally of the United States and help them to go on with this process. I think at a later point, Trump will realize that the process is going nowhere because Hamas is not willing and will never be willing to give up its arms. But I think Israel is waiting for the United States to reach that understanding on their own. And I would just point out another thing is that now is not a good time for Israel to get into a crisis with the United States, with an impending attack against Iran. Could be 24 hours away or 3 days or a week, but it's going to happen. So Israel doesn't want to be in any which way, in friction with the United States at this point. And that could be also part of the decision to open up Rafah. Now, I want to mention one more thing. You talked about, there's a third part. We talked about the Board of Peace, and we talked about the military international stabilization force. The third part that's supposed to take over in Gaza is the 15-member technocratic committee, and they're supposed to be like a governing board for Gaza. Now, I just want to read something to you. Palestinian Media, we just translated some very shocking material about the head of this committee. His name is Ali Shah, and he is presented as a technocrat, a non-political person. He's leading it. Now, we have found an interview of his from April of this year, before he was appointed, of course, and even suggested there was no committee at that point that was even be discussed. And I want you to listen to some of the things that he said in that interview, which we will be subtitling and releasing in the next few days.
I'd love if you could give us like a short little recap of it. That's great.
Okay, so first of all, he defines Israel as follows: this colonialist who was planted by American and Western Europe. They planted it in Palestine ever since the Balfour Promise, the Balfour Declaration. This is the colonialist. He is denying Israel's historical right to exist. He's denying Israel's history. This is classic Palestinian Authority demonization of Israel by claiming that we don't have a right to exist. We are only a colonial implant. And that is how this head of this committee, who's supposed to be non-political, that's how he identifies Israel. In that interview, he a number of times refers to Israel as he doesn't say Israel by name. He talks about the occupation, which again is Palestinian Authority ideology. Don't refer to Israel as a state, just as the occupation. And he also gloated about the fact that years ago on Land Day, and I'm quoting to you now, like every Palestinian, I did an activity with young people at schools and demonstrations against the Israeli occupation. We'd stand in areas where there are checkpoints and throw rocks at them. We set this day ablaze. I was actually the organizers of this activity in the city of Khan Yunis. So here he is bragging about his fighting Israeli soldiers. So the person who is supposed to lead a group of people who are going to be involved in making peace is himself proud of his terror past and refuses to recognize Israel's right to exist as a legitimate state.
And this is the body that's also supposed to replace Hamas and help disarm Hamas. So there's clearly no guarantee for Israel that security for the long term on Israel's southern border, that Israel can secure its southern border, is basically what you're saying.
Absolutely not. The belief that, first of all, the only way the Hamas is ever going to leave is going to be if it's destroyed, unfortunately, by war by Israel. We'll have to resort to that probably. But this government, even were it to rule afterward, even after Israel destroys Hamas, if this were the committee that would be in place, where we already know that the head of it doesn't even recognize Israel's historical right to exist, how can we expect them to build a peaceful Gaza? How can they expect them to change the messages? A person who's proud of his terror past. So literally the entire fantasy of creating this technocratic thing has to be done, has to be rebuilt. It has to be rethought out, and it needs people who really want peace. And it's going to be very hard to find them.
Mm-hmm. So just to recap, really, there's all of these movements and all of these developments, the opening of the Rafah border, the technocratic government, and all of these are things that Israel is very well aware will not succeed in achieving the goals that Israel had already stated, which is the disarmament of Hamas and the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip and creating a peaceful and prosperous Gaza Strip. None of these actions are going to work, and Israel is just sitting back and waiting for Washington to realize it?
I think so. Like I said, nothing is going to happen in terms of the United States recognizing this or giving Israel the go-ahead on Gaza to destroy Hamas until after the United States is finished with Iran. We have no idea how long that's going to take. But at some point, hopefully it'll be fast, hopefully it'll be quick, hopefully it'll be very successful. And then after having destroyed Iran's government, the United States will have to turn back toward Gaza and ultimately recognize that October 7th for every Israeli means that Hamas has to be destroyed. It can't be, okay, we'll let them sort of be in the background. No, they have to be destroyed. Every Israeli understands that. And he'll then hopefully give Israel the okay and say, okay, Israel, move ahead and do what you have to do.
Itamar, I'd love to continue picking your brain on this topic. There's so much more to discuss, but we are unfortunately out of time. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us your analysis.
Thank you.
And moving on, today the government approved a plan to rebuild one of Israel's most hard-hit cities in the last 2 years, Kiryat Shmona. This development follows a visit by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today in the municipality hall, where he said that the country is dedicated to the rehabilitation of the area. Kiryat Shmona has suffered relentless rocket fire from Hezbollah in southern Israel from October 8th, 2023, all the way through to November 2024, when a ceasefire was finally signed through U.S. mediators. Today, Netanyahu announced that a university will be built in the city in an effort to also attract newcomers, but also inspire those who have long evacuated from this northern city to finally return home. And Israel is facing an unprecedented heat wave in the middle of January. A dust storm from North Africa has entered the region, causing unusually hot weather in this winter month. Strong winds are set to pick up, and the Meteorological Service says dry southern air will push temperatures up to around 25 degrees in the mountains and nearly 30 degrees in the coastal plain. That's, of course, in Celsius, and the northern Negev, levels that Israel has not seen since 1987. And before we go, we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israel updates on Hey there, welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Divo Klein, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all of the biggest headlines from across the region. Earlier today, the government approved a plan to rebuild one of Israel's most hard-hit cities in the last 2 years, Kiryat Shmona. This development follows a visit by Prime Minister Netanyahu today in the municipality hall, where he said that the country is dedicated to the rehabilitation of the area. Kiryat Shmona has suffered relentless rocket fire from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon from October 8th, 2023, all the way through to November 2024, when U.S. brokered ceasefire was finally signed. Today, Netanyahu announced a university will be built in the city in an effort to attract newcomers, but also inspire those who have long evacuated to return home. Speaking alongside Transportation Minister Miri Regev, take a listen to what Netanyahu had to say.
הולכים לעשות כאן מהפכה ענקית. הכוונה לא רק להחזיר מאותם אנשים שעדיין לא חזרו, הרבה חזרו, אפילו הרוב חזרו. לא, אנחנו הולכים למקום אחר. אנחנו הולכים להגדיל באופן משמעותי את הגליל ואת צפון הגליל לאוכלוסייה. אנחנו הולכים לבנות פה גם עסקים, גם מוקדים ממשלתיים של תעשיות ממשלתיות, גם בדיור, גם ברווחה, גם בחינוך, גם בתיירות. השקעה ענקית של מדינת ישראל, אבל בעיקר שיתוף פעולה אדיר של ראשי היישובים כאן ושל תושבי הצפון. זה דבר גדול מאוד. לא תכירו את הצפון.
But is it all worth it? The IDF announced it struck Hezbollah assets in southern Lebanon today as the terror group continues violating the ceasefire and attempting to rebuild capabilities. The strikes targeted several Hezbollah engineering vehicles, which the IDF says were being used to re-establish terror infrastructure sites in the area. And when it comes to ceasefire violations, no one knows better than Hamas, who have been using Washington's efforts to continue to phase 2 to rebuild and re-establish in the Gaza Strip. Over the weekend, IDF troops found themselves coming under fire once again. The IDF struck Hamas gunmen who emerged from a tunnel near Rafah by the Yellow Line. According to the army, 3 of the gunmen were killed, a senior Hamas commander was captured, and the incident triggered a broader operation against terror infrastructure. The IDF also released footage of the dismantling of a terror tunnel in Khan Yunis. The tunnel contained dozens of weapons, including RPGs, grenades, rifles, and more, 3 living quarters, and stretched for hundreds of meters, according to the military. Troops of the 188th Armored Brigade and Yahalom unit dismantled the tunnel, eliminating the threat and disposing of the weapons that were hidden inside. And all of these developments come as the IDF and Kogat facilitate the opening of the Rafah crossing today, symbolizing the official transformation into phase 2. Foreign aid trucks and ambulances were seen piling up by the border crossing this morning, waiting to enter the Strip, as Israel and Egypt work closely to ensure that the crossing is used lawfully. The crossing will not be open for the transfer of goods or aid, as the Rafah crossing has been a notorious hotspot for weapon smuggling from Egypt into the Gaza Strip for 2 decades, an issue the IDF is attempting to monitor closely. Instead, only Gazans who previously left the Strip, medical patients, dual citizens, and others will be permitted to return after undergoing security screenings at an IDF checkpoint. And as speculation of a war with Iran grows, IDF Chief Eyal Zamir visits Washington to hold security talks with top U.S. officials that happened over the weekend. Trump says Tehran wants to negotiate, but has also given Iran a direct deadline to accept a deal he considers as fair and just, including a deal in which the regime gives up its nuclear weapons. This is a goal for Donald Trump, and according to the American president, failure to agree to a deal will lead to military action. The regime in response are threatening back. Ayatollah Khamenei said this morning that if the United States were to open a war front against Iran, the escalation would be regional. And before we go for now, we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israel
its statement, Central Command said it will not tolerate any provocative actions by Iranian forces. Iran's live-fire drills further underline rising regional tensions and reflect Tehran's push to demonstrate its military power. The United States is accelerating new capabilities designed to sustain a strong naval presence far from its home waters. The MQ-25 is being developed to extend the reach of U.S. warplanes operating in high-threat regions. By taking over the aerial refueling mission, this tanker allows manned fighters to focus on carrying out any strike missions. This shift significantly increases the range, persistence, and flexibility of carrier air wings during operations. The Stingray will also support intelligence and surveillance missions, boosting overall situational awareness for commanders. Against peer competitors, uncrewed systems like the MQ-25 are now seen as essential for modern combat operations.
It is ready to respond immediately to any attack.
Preparedness for rapid combat operations and decisive responses to any form of aggression continues to guide Iran's defense planning in line with anticipated threats.
At the same time, Tehran is also looking for de-escalation. They do not want a war. Iran's foreign minister is in Turkey for talks today. Turkey is offering to mediate between the U.S. and Iran because Ankara says a war in Iran would shake the entire region. So it believes that the resumption of Iran-U.S. nuclear talks is vital.
The countries in the region desire peace, stability, and tranquility. In this context, we call on the parties to come to the negotiating table. We believe that addressing the problems individually when the negotiating table is established will facilitate reaching a solution.
Tehran says any diplomacy hinges on threats ending, but it has refused to reduce its missile work.
I should also state unequivocally that Iran's defensive and missile capabilities and Iran's missiles will never be the subject of any negotiations. I do not think any country is prepared to compromise with anyone over its own security and defense. The security of the Iranian people is no one else's business, and we will preserve and expand our defensive capabilities to whatever extent is necessary to defend the country.
Now, in the middle of this, Europe has also stepped in. The European Union has designated the IRGC as a terrorist organization. IRGC is Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. They are not the regular Iranian army. They are a parallel force, a more powerful force. They were created after Iran's revolution in 1979, and they have one job: to protect the Iranian regime. Not the Iranian people, the Iranian regime. Now, the U.S. has designated them as terrorists. The EU, rather, has designated them as terrorists. Why did they do that? Because of the deadly crackdown during recent protests.
In Iran, horrific crackdown on protesters has come at a heavy human cost. The EU already has sweeping sanctions in place, and today ministers agreed to designate Iran Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization.
In turn, Iran is preparing to declare the EU's armed forces terrorists. So where does this leave leave us tonight, rather? With a few harsh realities. Washington is using military pressure to force talks. Tehran is building up its military to deter an attack. One side is saying make a deal. The other side is saying remove the threats first. I guess the question is, who will blink first? We'll be tracking this story for you. Our next story is from Iran. The protests have subsided, but the threat from America has not. Will the U.S. attack Iran? That question refuses to go away because Washington is sending mixed signals. Trump has moved what he calls his armada near Iran. It's a signal from Pentagon. that's the US Defense Ministry. This kind of military movement shows preparation for a possible attack. But on the other hand, Trump is suggesting that he wants to talk to Iran, that he does not want to use his military in West Asia. So what does the US president really want? Is this a countdown to another war, or is this just muscle flexing? Well, here's what we know. Earlier this week, Donald Trump made a statement. He said the US has a massive armada heading towards Iran. That's his way of saying that powerful warships are in the region and they're ready to strike Iran. Now look at what this armada includes. 1 aircraft carrier, fighter jets, destroyers, and combat ships. And that's not it. Reports say that the US has sent another warship to the region. It is called the USS Delbert Black. This takes the total number of American warships in the region to 6. That's what you call a military buildup. We saw the same near Venezuela last month, and we know how that ended. The US abducted the Venezuelan president. Having said that, Iran is not Venezuela. It has a bigger, stronger military, and the US knows that. The US knows that Iran is not a pushover. Meanwhile, the rhetoric from Washington continues. Here's what happened at a US cabinet meeting yesterday. Their Secretary of War, or what you'd call a defense minister, is Pete Hegseth. He said that the US is prepared to attack Iran.
You may want to say something about the large fleet of ships that's heading over to the Middle East.
With Iran right now, ensuring that they have all the options to make a deal. They should not pursue nuclear capabilities. We will be prepared to deliver whatever this president expects of the War Department.
Officials say that Trump has not made a decision. He's still reviewing his options, but he has also been wanting to talk to Iran. Listen to this.
On Iran, Mr. President, have you had any conversations with Iran in the last few days, and are you planning on any?
I have had, and I am planning on it, yes. We have a lot of very big, very powerful ships sailing to Iran right now, and it would be great if we didn't have to use them.
So that is Trump's position. He wants to stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons, and he wants Tehran to come back to the talking table. How is Iran responding? They say there will be no negotiations under threats. In fact, Iran has now added 1,000 drones to its military. These are drones built after last year's 12-day war, the war that was fought between Iran and Israel. It's also the war where the US attacked Iranian nuclear sites in June last year. Tehran now says it is ready to respond immediately to any attack.
Preparedness for rapid combat operations and decisive responses to any form of aggression continues to guide Iran's defense planning in line with anticipated threats.
At the same time, Tehran is also looking for de-escalation. They do not want a war. Iran's foreign minister is in Turkey for talks today. Turkey is offering to mediate between the US and Iran because Ankara says a war in Iran would shake the entire region. So it believes that the resumption of Iran-US nuclear talks is vital.
The countries in the region desire peace, stability, and tranquility. In this context, we call on the parties to come to the negotiating table. We believe that addressing the problems individually when the negotiating table is established will facilitate reaching a solution.
Tehran says any diplomacy hinges on threats ending, but it has refused to reduce its missile work.
I should also state unequivocally that Iran's defensive and missile capabilities and Iran's missiles will never be the subject of any negotiations. I do not think any country is prepared to compromise with anyone over its own security and defense. The security of the Iranian people is no one else's business, and we will preserve and expand our defensive capabilities to whatever extent is necessary to defend the country.
Now, in the middle of this, Europe has also stepped in. The European Union has designated the IRGC as a terrorist organization. IRGC is Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. They are not the regular Iranian army. They are a parallel force, a more powerful force. They were created after Iran's revolution in 1979, and they have one job: to protect the Iranian regime. Not the Iranian people, the Iranian regime. Now, the U.S. has designated them as terrorists. The EU, rather, has designated them as terrorists. Why did they do that? Because of the deadly crackdown during recent protests.
In Iran, horrific Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization.
In turn, Iran is preparing to declare the EU's armed forces terrorists. So where does this leave leave us tonight, rather? With a few harsh realities. Washington is using military pressure to force talks. Tehran is building up its military to deter an attack. One side is saying make a deal. The other side is saying remove the threats first. I guess the question is who will blink first? We'll be tracking this story for you. Our next story is from Iran. The protests have subsided, but the threat from America has not. Will the U.S. attack Iran? That question refuses to go away because Washington is sending mixed signals. Trump has moved what he calls his armada near Iran. It's a signal from Pentagon, that's the U.S. Defense Ministry. This kind of military movement shows preparation for a possible attack. But on the other hand, Trump is suggesting that he wants to talk to Iran, that he does not want to use his military in West Asia. So what does the US president really want? Is this a countdown to another war, or is this just muscle flexing? Well, here's what we know. Earlier this week, Donald Trump made a statement. He said the US has a massive armada heading towards Iran. That's his way of saying that powerful warships are in the region and they're ready to strike Iran. Now look at what this armada includes. 1 aircraft carrier, fighter jets, destroyers and combat ships. And that's not it. Reports say that the US has sent another warship to the region. It is called the USS Delbert Black. This takes the total number of American warships in the region to 6. That's what you call a military buildup. We saw the same near Venezuela last month, and we know how that ended. The US abducted the Venezuelan president. Having said that, Iran is not Venezuela. It has a bigger, stronger military, and the US knows that. The US knows that Iran is not a pushover. Meanwhile, the rhetoric from Washington continues. Here's what happened at a US cabinet meeting yesterday. Their Secretary of War, or what you'd call a defense minister, is Pete Hegseth. He said that the US is prepared to attack Iran.
You may want to say something about the large fleet of ships that's heading over to the Middle East.
With Iran right now, ensuring that they have all the options to make a deal. They should not pursue nuclear capabilities. We will be prepared to deliver whatever this president expects of the War Department.
Officials say that Trump has not made a decision. He's still reviewing his options, but he has also been wanting to talk to Iran. Listen to this.
On Iran, Mr. President, have you had any conversations with Iran in the last few days, and are you planning on any?
I have had, and I am planning on it, yeah. We have a lot of very big, very powerful ships sailing to Iran right now, and it would be great if we didn't have to use them.
So that is Trump's position. He wants to stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons, and he wants Tehran to come back to the talking table. How is Iran responding? They say there will be no negotiations under threats. In fact, Iran has now added 1,000 drones to its military. These are drones built after last year's 12-day war, the war that was fought between Iran and Israel. It's also the war where the US attacked Iranian nuclear sites in June last year. Tehran now says it is ready to respond immediately to any attack.
Preparedness for rapid combat operations and decisive responses to any form of aggression continues to guide Iran's defense planning in line with anticipated threats.
At the same time, Tehran is also looking for de-escalation. They do not want a war. Iran's foreign minister is in Turkey for talks today. Turkey is offering to mediate between the US and Iran because Ankara says a war in Iran would shake the entire region. So it believes that the resumption of Iran-US nuclear talks is vital.
The countries in the region desire peace, stability, and tranquility. In this context, we call on the parties to come to the negotiating table. We believe that addressing the problems individually when the negotiating table is established will facilitate reaching a solution.
Tehran says any diplomacy hinges on threats ending, but it has refused to reduce its missile work.
I should also state unequivocally that Iran's defensive and missile capabilities and Iran's missiles will never be the subject of any negotiations. I do not think any country is prepared to compromise with anyone over its own security and defense. The security of the Iranian people is no one else's business, and we will preserve and expand our defensive capabilities to whatever extent is necessary to defend the country.
Now, in the middle of this, Europe has also stepped in. The European Union has designated the IRGC as a terrorist organization. IRGC is Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. They are not the regular Iranian army. They are a parallel force, a more powerful force. They were created after Iran's revolution in 1979, and they have one job: to protect the Iranian regime. Not the Iranian people, the Iranian regime. Now, the U.S. has designated them as terrorists. The EU, rather, has designated them as terrorists. Why did they do that? Because of the deadly crackdown during recent protests.
In Iran, horrific crackdown on protesters has come at a heavy human cost. The EU already has sweeping sanctions in place, and today ministers agreed to designate Iran Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization.
In turn, Iran is preparing to declare the EU's armed forces terrorists. So where does this leave leave us tonight, rather? With a few harsh realities. Washington is using military pressure to force talks. Tehran is building up its military to deter an attack. One side is saying make a deal. The other side is saying remove the threats first. I guess the question is, who will blink first? We'll be tracking this story for you. Our next story is from Iran. The protests have subsided, but the threat from America has not. Will the U.S. attack Iran? That question refuses to go away because Washington is sending mixed signals. Trump has moved what he calls his armada near Iran. It's a signal from Pentagon, that's the U.S. Defense Ministry. This kind of military movement shows preparation for a possible attack. But on the other hand, Trump is suggesting that he wants to talk to Iran, that he does not want to use his military in West Asia. So what does the US president really want? Is this a countdown to another war, or is this just muscle flexing? Well, here's what we know. Earlier this week, Donald Trump made a statement. He said the US has a massive armada heading towards Iran. That's his way of saying that powerful warships are in the region and they're ready to strike Iran. Now look at what this armada includes: one aircraft carrier, fighter jets, destroyers, and combat ships. And that's not it. Reports say that the US has sent another warship to the region. It is called the USS Delbert Black. This takes the total number of American warships in the region to 6. That's what you call a military buildup. We saw the same near Venezuela last month, and we know how that ended. The US abducted the Venezuelan president. Having said that, Iran is not Venezuela. It has a bigger, stronger military, and the US knows that. The US knows that Iran is not a pushover. Meanwhile, the rhetoric from Washington continues. Here's what happened at a US cabinet meeting yesterday. Their Secretary of War, or what you'd call a defense minister, is Pete Hegseth. He said that the US is prepared to attack Iran.
You may want to say something about the large fleet of ships that's heading over to the Middle East.
With Iran right now, ensuring that they have all the options to make a deal. They should not pursue nuclear capabilities. We will be prepared to deliver whatever this president expects of the War Department.
Officials say that Trump has not made a decision. He's still reviewing his options. But he has also been wanting to talk to Iran. Listen to this.
On Iran, Mr. President, have you had any conversations with Iran in the last few days, and are you planning on any?
I have had, and I am planning on it, yeah. We have a lot of very big, very powerful ships sailing to Iran right now, and it would be great if we didn't have to use them.
So that is Trump's position. He wants to stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons, and he wants Tehran to come back to the talking table. How is Iran responding? They say there will be no negotiations under threats. In fact, Iran has now added 1,000 drones to its military. These are drones built after last year's 12-day war, the war that was fought between Iran and Israel. It's also the war where the U.S. attacked Iranian nuclear sites in June last year. Tehran now says it is ready to respond immediately to any attack.
Preparedness for rapid combat operations and decisive responses to any form of aggression continues to guide Iran's defense planning in line with anticipated threats.
At the same time, Tehran is also looking for de-escalation. They do not want a war. Iran's foreign minister is in Turkey for talks today. Turkey is offering to mediate between the U.S. and
are not going away. Milena Veselinovic, Al Jazeera, London.
The United States has sent a new envoy to Venezuela as both countries gradually resume bilateral relations. Laura Dogu is in Caracas ahead of plans by the Trump administration to reopen the U.S. embassy there. It will be the first time in 7 years that Washington has had a diplomatic mission in the Venezuelan capital. It's been 4 weeks since the U.S. captured President Nicolas Maduro and his wife in a military operation. Costa Ricans are voting in a presidential election, overshadowed by rising drug-related violence. Murders have risen by 50% in the last 6 years, mostly linked to drug trafficking. The leading candidates have put forward competing visions for security. Costa Rica's centre-right populist government is seeking to extend its mandate. Our correspondent, Julia Galliano, reports from the capital, San Jose.
It's lunchtime at Soda Tala, one of San Jose's most popular spots. And with presidential elections around the corner, even a plate of traditional gallo pinto comes with a side of politics.
Today's politicians no longer work from the heart. They're driven by other interests. Politics is no longer about love for our flag.
It's a sentiment many Costa Ricans share after a long and bruising campaign. For a country used to boasting about its electoral process and stable democracy, abstention could reach 40% in Sunday's elections.
As Costa Ricans, we are very worried about security. The levels of violence have grown so much, be it because of drugs or extortion.
The rising crime rate has dominated the race, even as the candidates disagree on how far to go to tackle it. Conservative Laura Fernandez wants a state of emergency and closer ties with U.S. forces, plus constitutional and judicial reforms, which critics say could give her unprecedented power. Trailing behind her is Alvaro Ramos, a centrist candidate who has promised thousands more police officers on the streets and greater social spending to address the root causes of the rise in crime. But this couple think that young people need incentives to stay away from organized crime. An issue third-place candidate Claudia Dobles says her government would tackle on day one by designating 8% of the GDP to educational institutions. Soda Tala is such a popular spot that even one of the presidential candidates stopped by for lunch. Though his chances of winning Sunday's election are slim, Juan Carlos Hidalgo voiced the concern of nearly half of Costa Ricans, a fear that the stakes of this election go beyond individual candidates.
This is the challenge that we opposition politicians have, how we convince Costa Ricans that democracy is at stake and that we can be sleepwalking into a trap on February 1st.
Costa Rican opposition hope they will be able to rally on Sunday so that together they can keep the ruling party candidate from an outright win and force a second round. The winning candidate will need 40% of the votes to avoid a runoff. Julia Galliano, Al Jazeera, San Jose, Costa Rica.
New proposed laws over foreign funding in Georgia are triggering mass protests in the capital, Tbilisi. Individuals or groups that receive foreign funding without approval could face fines or prison terms. The government says it's aimed at stopping foreign interference, but critics say the measures would silence dissent and mirror laws used in Russia to target civil society and independent media. Right, that's it from me, Sarah Khairat. More information always on our website, aljazeera.com. Weather is next, then Inside Story takes a look at how will Pakistan deal with the growing security challenges that it's facing in Baluchistan. Do stay with us.
Hello, it's starting to heat up once again across, the Arabian Peninsula. Some largely dry and settled weather. A little more unsettled further north, though. We've got some rain, some snow through the Turkish mountains, easing over towards the Caspian. And we'll see some wet and some wintry weather running over towards Afghanistan as we go through Tuesday. By Tuesday, a good part of Iraq, northwestern areas of Iran, even down into Kuwait, we'll see some lively showers. Mid to high 20s there for Doha, for Riyadh. Not too bad, too, in Dubai. Temperatures here around 26, 27 degrees over the next couple of days. Good deal cooler, though, into the eastern side of the Med. More of that wintry weather rolling across Turkey. We have got some showers there into Cyprus. Some wet weather just pushing into the Levant. Heavy at times for Lebanon. Some showers there into Gaza. Quite a cool day, 18 Celsius. So it's wet. There's more blustery showers across the northern fringes of Africa through the Mediterranean. It turns wet and cool into Morocco as we go through Monday. Possibility of some snow over the Atlas Mountains by Tuesday. Meanwhile, plenty of showers there just along the coastal fringes of West Africa, joining up with the showers that we have across tropical zone of Africa. Meanwhile, our tropical cyclone now in the process of pulling away from Madagascar and turning drier behind.
Bangladesh is heading into one of its most consequential elections. The first since the toppling of the authoritarian Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in 2024. In the balance is the future of the country's democracy and the secular principles in its constitution. In a four-part series, Al Jazeera speaks to those shaping this fragile transition, pressing them on their records and their competing visions of the future. Bangladesh, a democratic test on Al Jazeera.
How will Pakistan deal with growing security challenges in the southwestern province of Baluchistan? Another coordinated attack by separatists has killed dozens of people. Many ethnic Baluch have long complained of neglect and oppression by Islamabad. So what will it take to end the cycle of violence there? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Marlene Saeed. It's called Pakistan's Forgotten War, and it's been running for decades in Baluchistan, the country's largest province by land area. Another wave of violence this week has claimed the lives of more than 100 people. The Baluchistan Liberation Army, also known as the BLA, has claimed responsibility for the attacks described as the deadliest so far. The BLA has escalated its attacks in recent years, saying it's fighting for an independent Baluchistan. In Islamabad, the government accuses what it calls its enemies for the violence carried out by armed separatists. We will discuss this complex situation in Baluchistan with our guests in just a moment, but first, Imogen Kimber has this report.
The aftermath of one of the many coordinated attacks across Baluchistan province in Pakistan on Saturday. Dozens of people were killed, along with military personnel. Targets included a prison, police stations and government buildings. Nearly 100 members of the separatist group, which claimed responsibility for the attack, were also killed in fighting with security forces. The Baluchistan Liberation Army, or BLA, operate not just from within Baluchistan province, but from Baluch areas in southern Afghanistan and southeastern Iran, carrying out attacks in southwestern Pakistan. They want an end to governance from Islamabad and an independent state for the ethnic Baluch people. Despite being rich in resources and its strategic location, The province is the poorest in Pakistan. Apart from government and security facilities, the group has also targeted projects funded by China. In 2025, they hijacked a train, taking hundreds of people hostage. Dozens were killed. The BLA are designated as a terrorist group by the US, China, the UK, the EU and Pakistan. Pakistan has accused India of backing the BLA for many years, but New Delhi has denied this. The Chief Minister of Baluchistan has vowed revenge for this attack.
We will avenge each and every attack that you have suffered. Keep your morale high. We will not spare the attackers.
The minister says additional attacks were stopped, and around 70 fighters were killed in 2 operations in the days before the attack, and more than 700 over the past year. Yet the decades-long fight of the separatists shows no signs of stopping. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Okay, let's bring in our guest. From Islamabad is Rashid Wali Janjua, former brigadier in Pakistan's army and director of research at the Islamabad Policy Research Institute. From Quetta, Baluchistan province in Pakistan is Sanaullah Baloch, a leader from the Baluchistan National Party. And finally from London, we have Ayesha Siddiqa, senior research fellow at the Department of Defence Studies at King's College London. Many thanks to all of you for joining the programme. Ayesha, if I could start with you. Looking at the size and sophistication of the recent attacks, the BLA appear to have transformed themselves from what was once a tribal militia into a professional fighting force. Would you agree with that assessment? And if so, how did that happen?
Well, BLA's rise has been very visible, especially in the last 10 years. And it's not just because it is a military development, because it's also the peculiar political development in Balochistan. The more suppression that the state has used, the more disappointed the people have got. I mean, what is very peculiar about these attacks, recent attacks, is the kind of support they've got from the people. That is significant. I mean, for them, for BLA, recruitment no longer is a problem. And they have expanded their influence. This is where we stand today.
If I could come to you, Rashid, I don't think you would argue with the fact that insurgency is now geographically bigger than it ever was, more sophisticated than it ever was. Recruitment is clearly not a problem. Is this down to the current strategy of using force by the government? Is that now failing rather than focusing on dialogue?
No, I don't agree with this formulation. I think it's an externally abetted insurgency, and the BLA activists, whom we now call Fitnatul Hindustan, those are acting as the proxies of Indians, and they have no shortage of arms, no shortage of the equipment. And you can see a terrorist who is equipped with M16 and laser-guided aiming systems, night vision goggles, which cost millions. And from where are they getting this money? I think there is a whole trail of, proxy warfare, organized crime, and
Rashid, if I could interrupt you briefly, what we are seeing now is a movement that is recruiting educated middle-class professionals, engineers, students, even doctors and teachers from within the Baluchistan region. How do you explain that? If you keep pointing the finger to India, why are they recruiting people from within the state?
You see, they have been exploiting in the past. There were certain ungoverned spaces, and the sanctuaries in Afghanistan, they provide a safe haven to them. Then, prior to our interaction with Iran, there was a whole network operating from Chabahar, which was being run by RAW. I agree that there are educated people who are getting on the bandwagon, and the inducements are there, of course. The negative indoctrination is there, and there are always people who are more vulnerable to such blandishments, such blackmails, and such coercion. I agree that some have been weaned towards the insurgents' cause, but these are very, the numbers are not that much. Primarily, the bulk of the population is with Pakistan and Pakistan's armed forces, and they have not been won over by the poisonous propaganda of BLA. It is the continual external support that is sustaining this insurgency.
If I could let Sanwala respond to that. So the government says, Sanwala, that India is the problem. India is funding the BLA. All its problems are external. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, we have to understand the genesis of the Balochistan crisis and the conflict itself. Without understanding the conflict, crisis, and the 75 history of Baloch-Pakistan relation, it's going to be very difficult because it's not just yesterday's events what triggered this discussion. There are historical, political, economic extraction, underdevelopment, and more recently, the governance crisis that has led to Balochistan to this level.
Overnight, Iran's supreme leader warning any U.S. strike on the region will spark an all-out regional war, but President Trump still not ruling out an attack.
Could you give us an update on where your thinking is right now with Iran, if you have made a final decision on what you want to do?
I mean, I certainly can't tell you that, but we do have very big, powerful ships heading in that direction. I hope they negotiate something that's acceptable. If you could make a negotiated deal that would be satisfactory with no nuclear weapons, they should do that, but I don't know that they will, but they are talking to us, seriously talking to us.
Meanwhile, fresh satellite images you see here showing new roofs built over damaged buildings that bombed out nuclear sites struck by the U.S. and Israel last summer. Retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano joins us now. Colonel, thanks for getting up early with us. This is very interesting. How do you see where things stand? You heard in that soundbite President Trump aboard Air Force One saying that the conversations are serious from Iran, but yet at the same time, he's also saying that he's not afraid to strike.
Right. Just to get, and for the record, I really like the Melania film. So
we've got you on record for that.
So the key variable here, if he's looking at the Venezuela model, is Trump is not going to do a military strike to take down the regime unless he has something that he's confident can replace that. So that is really key. Now, he might do a more limited nuclear strike. I mean, a more limited strike, just striking the nuclear facilities, kind of following up from last time, also would send a strong signal. So he has a lot of options here other than just take down the regime or do nothing.
Colonel, is it your sense, though, that the Iranians are actually negotiating in good faith? Or are they, critics pointed out that President Putin may have played President Trump, dragging out negotiations. Do you think this is the Iranians in an act of desperation with such an armada surrounding them are just trying to stall?
So there's a couple of things that could be going on. First of all, this part of the world, honor is power. If you're not respected unless you look strong. So the Iranians are always going to talk tough, regardless of how desperate their situation is. That's just the way you do it in this region. So you can almost ignore everything they say publicly. Now, we don't know what the back channel talks are. They could be with some people in the regime that's actually negotiating a deal. They might be with some people in the regime like we saw in Venezuela, which is like, okay, we'll get rid of some people and then we'll cut a deal. I think we just don't know. But this is very Trumpian in the sense that Trump likes to set up confrontations that are win-win. So regardless of what the adversary does, I come off better than I started before. And I think that he's achieved that here. He's either going to get the regime to make some concessions, or he's going to do some strikes to belittle them, or he's going to drive a scenario like we saw in Venezuela. And I think, you know what? I think he's fine with that.
And Colonel, you mentioned the Iranian Islamic regime. So timing, of course, is everything. And many have pointed out, to include our own General Jack Keane, that this regime has never been weaker. What do you make of the timing of it?
Yeah, so this is true, and this, I think, is the key thing, right? Because look at it from the American perspective. What's in America's best interest? So, yes, we'd love for the Iranian people to be free and have their own government, but what's critically in our interest is this is a regime that is weak. that can't mess around in Syria, that can't threaten Israel, that isn't funding surrogates, that isn't being powerful allies for the Russians and the Chinese. So these are all things that Trump can accomplish with a weak Iran. So again, regardless of the course of action he picks, at the end of the day, he wants a weak regime. And this is absolutely not going to lead to a larger regional conflict. We had two major strikes from the Israelis and the Americans on the Iranian regime. The rest of the regime did nothing. If somebody strikes this regime or weakens it more, the rest of the region's got to do nothing.
Yeah, we shall see where it goes. A lot of eyes on that. Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano, thank you. Have a great Sunday.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
Goods and the service delivery that is being provided. That's not the issue. I can show you much deprived areas and areas which are as low on HDI in other parts of Pakistan. But do they take up the arms against the state?
Okay.
It's a dangerous, poisonous creed, ideology that drives such a thought process that recourse to violence is a political right. So that's the fallacy. We need to disabuse ourselves
I'm going to let
certain
Sanawala
fallacies.
respond. If I could let Sanawala respond to that. Sanawala, so you heard it there, Rashid saying the state is doing its best in Baluchistan. Why has this issue of CPEC become such a divisive issue in Baluchistan?
Well, the people of Balochistan love development. They are a very progressive people. When in 1948 they joined the accession document with Pakistan, there were promises made to them that the region will get equal and just benefit from this newly established nation state that's called Pakistan. But unfortunately, since 1948, we have multiple 5-year development plans. In all those plans, Balochistan was deliberately kept underdeveloped. Balochistan was kept deliberately deprived from such development processes because Balochistan has been weighted in the Pakistani framework, in the Pakistani political representative framework, based on its the parameter is population. So Baloch people definitely they are not in many in terms of numbers. They are 6 to 7% of the country's Pakistan's population. During the CPEC project, Baloch people have justly asked and demanded that since Balochistan has been deliberately kept under development, so whatever development is coming, Balochistan and even rest of the Pakistan, because we have a western rim that's underdeveloped, including some parts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, they should get priority. But unfortunately, if you see on their website, all these projects of $25 billion.
unveil its new Samor 300mm multiple launch rocket system, aiming to impress potential buyers with a fresh, combat-driven design tailored for modern, high-intensity battlefields. According to Defense Security Asia and other defense outlets, images circulating online show the Samor system already on Saudi soil by January 29, 2026, underscoring how early Russia moved hardware into place ahead of the exhibition to build buzz and signal seriousness. The World Defense Show in Riyadh is scheduled to run from February 8 to February 12, 2026, giving Russia a 5-day global stage to court delegations, demonstrate capabilities, and negotiate deals in one of the world's most important defense markets. The early arrival of Samor in Saudi Arabia highlights how urgently Russia is pushing to secure contracts with regional buyers, racing to position its systems ahead of rival suppliers and convert battlefield experience into export revenue. Moscow is pitching Samor as a lighter, highly mobile 300mm rocket launcher conceived in the crucible of the Ukraine war, designed to move fast, fire precision salvos, and survive in an environment saturated with drones and counter-battery radars. This unveiling is part of a broader bid by Moscow to stage a comeback in long-range precision fires, using lessons from Ukraine to refine its rocket artillery doctrine and prove to foreign customers that Russian systems remain competitive on the modern battlefield. Samor is mounted on a KAMAZ 635018 by 8 armored truck for high-mobility fire missions. Its 6,300mm launch tubes can unleash a full rocket salvo in about 18 seconds. A 3-person crew can aim and fire entirely from a protected armored cabin. The system is compatible with Smerch and Tornado-S rockets, including guided variants. Guided rockets are advertised with ranges from around 120 kilometers to nearly 200 kilometers. Samor is positioned as a lighter, cheaper rival to Tornado-S and Western HIMARS. Ukrainian defense analysts say Samor was created as a direct answer to the battlefield impact of U.S. HIMARS, with Russia rushing to field a similar long-range precision rocket able to strike depots, command posts, and logistics hubs far behind the front lines. Each Samor launcher is estimated at about 155 million rubles, noticeably cheaper than a HIMARS unit priced around $5 to $6 million, giving Moscow a cost edge it hopes will tempt militaries seeking affordable long-range firepower. Russia is promoting Samor as a lower-cost alternative to Western precision rocket systems, emphasizing that unlike US and European platforms often tied to strict political conditions, its launcher comes with far fewer export or end-use restrictions. Potential buyers highlighted in defense reports include Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Egypt, and Algeria, all of which already field Russian artillery or rocket systems, making it easier to plug Samor into their current training, logistics, and ammunition chains. Rostic is also promoting the BTR-228 x 8 armored vehicle, ballista remote weapon stations, and Planchette A fire control systems, packaging Samor within a wider ecosystem of vehicles and digital command tools for modern ground forces. Russian officials have floated joint production, local assembly, and tech transfer deals, offering partners ways to meet localization rules and soften sanctions pressure while still acquiring Samor and related systems. Some strategists argue that, tied into modern sensors and targeting networks, Samor batteries could boost Middle Eastern states' deterrence against Iranian air or missile attacks by enabling rapid counterstrikes on launch areas and key bases. Analysts also warn of serious escalation risks if Samor or its guided rockets were to leak to Iran-backed non-state groups, since such precision systems would sharply increase the lethality of cross-border strikes on cities and critical infrastructure. On January 29th, Vladimir Putin welcomed UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed to Moscow for an official visit, using the high-profile Kremlin meeting to underline how central Abu Dhabi has become to Russia's regional diplomacy and back-channel mediation efforts. During the talks, the UAE president publicly reaffirmed Abu Dhabi's commitment to deepening its strategic partnership with Russia, stressing that the two countries want to expand cooperation in trade, energy, technology, and mediation efforts despite wider geopolitical tensions. Putin told the Emirati leader that Russia is closely watching rising tensions around Iran and said he wanted to discuss the Iran-US standoff in detail, framing the UAE visit as a chance to coordinate positions and warn against any military escalation in the Gulf. This meeting also came against the backdrop of a rare public rift between the UAE and Saudi Arabia over Yemen, where clashes over Emirati-backed forces and Saudi security concerns exposed deeper strategic friction between the two longtime Gulf partners.
Iran's Supreme National Security Council Secretary Ali Larijani contacted officials in several regional countries, including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, and warned that Tehran would target U.S. embassies in those countries if the United States attacked Iran. An Iranian government source familiar with the situation told Iran International. Iran's Supreme Leader's advisor, Ali Shamkhani, warned that the Islamic Republic is fully prepared to deter any threats and will respond harshly to hostile actions, including, if necessary, by striking targets in Israel. Any steps that indicate hostile intentions on the part of the enemy will be met with a proportionate, effective, and deterrent response. Lebanese television channel Al Mayadeen quoted Shamkhani as saying, "This proportionate response includes striking deep into the Zionist entity." He added, "I have uncovered the enemy's operational plan. We are in complete control of the situation, and we will strike at the appropriate time at those points that will paralyze this plan," Shamkhani asserts. And Iranian hardline MP Kamran Ghazanfari told the website Did Ban Iran that Iranian military officials have already responded to Trump and conveyed the message to the Americans that if they cross red lines and commit any act of aggression, all U.S. military bases in countries surrounding us will become targets. The Americans will suffer heavy losses and damage, he asserted. Iran International, citing an analysis of satellite imagery provided by Planet Labs, PBC, reports that Iran is urgently taking measures to protect its nuclear facilities amid the threat of new attacks from the United States. Roofs and protective structures have been erected over the facilities in Natanz and Isfahan. The images show new construction. The addition of new structures makes aerial observation of the facilities impossible. Meanwhile, the Iranian armed forces declared their support for the IRGC in the fight against terrorism following the designation of the corps as a terrorist organization. In the statement, the military accused European countries of supporting Iraq during the 1980 to 1988 war, providing chemical weapons and modern military equipment to Saddam Hussein's forces, and subsequently providing safe haven to armed groups. Today, to please the United States and the Zionist regime, they have included the largest anti-terrorist organization in the region and the world in a fictitious list of terrorists, the Iranian army noted. The military added that the Iranian armed forces will continue to counter Western-backed terrorism. Recall, U.S. President Donald Trump announced the deployment of forces to Iran larger than those in Venezuela. "We have a large armada, a flotilla, whatever you want to call it, heading to Iran right now. It's even bigger than we had in Venezuela. If we make a deal, great. If not, we'll see what happens," the U.S. president said. White House reporters asked Trump to clarify whether he had set a time limit for Tehran before the U.S. took further action against Iran. "I'm sure only they, the Iranians, know," the U.S. president replied.
Assailants armed with guns and grenades carried out nearly a dozen coordinated attacks across southern Pakistan early Saturday, targeting a high-security prison, police stations, and paramilitary installation, killing at least 10 security personnel, authorities said. At least 37 insurgents were also killed in the gun battles. Though Baloch separatists and the Pakistani Taliban frequently target security forces in Balochistan and elsewhere in the country, coordinated attacks on this scale are rare. In Quetta, a police vehicle was attacked with grenades, according to the provincial health minister, killing 2 officers. AP video showed a burnt-out truck and armed security forces securing the scene. Other security officials set up roadblocks across the city and an emergency was declared in Quetta's hospitals. Quetta resident Madiola Khan told Associated Press that panic and fear have spread across the city. "There are intermittent sounds of firing and explosions happening all over the city," he added. Exchange of fire between police and the insurgents across southern Pakistan is ongoing. Pakistan's Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi confirmed the 10 killings in a statement and claimed that the attacks were carried out by the Indian-backed Fitna al-Hindustan, a phrase the government uses for the outlawed Baloch Liberation Army, or BLA, and other separatist groups. Also Saturday, dozens of insurgents attacked a prison in Mastang district, freeing more than 30 inmates, local police said. Insurgents also hurled hand grenades at the office of a government administrator in Dalbandan district and attacked security posts in Balinka, Tump, Mastang, and Karan districts. Pakistan has seen a surge in militant violence in recent months, largely blamed on Baloch separatist groups seeking independence from Pakistan's central government in Islamabad, and the Pakistani Taliban, known as Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP.
वो हमारा नहीं है।
कोटा शहर के जो सूरत-ए-हाल है वो इंतहाई गंभीर है और खौफ आरास फैला हुआ है पूरे शहर में। वक्फे से फायरिंगों की आवाज़ें और एक के बाद दिगरे धमाके भी हो रहे हैं। तो इस सूरत-ए-हाल में जो शहरी है वो खौफ में मुब्तला है।
Turkey's foreign minister on Friday.
Forget what you think you know about Iran's aging air force. With the arrival of the Russian Su-35 and a domestic fleet of thousands of suicide drones, the skies over the Middle East just became a lot more crowded. Today, we are listing every single weapon Iran has prepared for a direct conflict with the United States. Iran maintains the largest and most diverse missile arsenal in the Middle East, specifically designed to reach U.S. regional bases and carrier strike groups. Hypersonic missiles, Fatah-1 and Fatah-2. Iran claims these can reach Mach 15 and maneuver in flight to bypass missile defenses like THAAD and Aegis. Medium-range ballistic missiles, MRBMS. Khorramshahr-4, its most advanced MRBM, capable of carrying a 1,500-kilogram warhead with high precision. Sejil, a solid-fuel missile with a 2,000-kilometer range, capable of rapid launch to avoid preemptive strikes. Shahab-3 and Ghadar, workhorse liquid-fuel missiles capable of reaching targets across the Middle East and parts of Europe. Khaybar Sheikhan, optimized for evading air defenses through high-speed terminal maneuvers. Short-range ballistic missiles, SRBMs, Fateh 110 and Fateh 313, highly accurate solid-fuel missiles used in the 2020 Al-Assad airbase strike. Zulfiqar, a longer-range SRBM with a detachable warhead to complicate interception. Xiam-1, a finless missile designed to be difficult to track on radar. Iran utilizes drone swarms to saturate and overwhelm sophisticated air defense systems. One-way attack kamikaze, drones shot 136/131. Low-cost delta-wing loitering munitions used extensively in regional conflicts to hit fixed targets. Arash-2, a larger suicide drone specifically designed to target radar systems and regional infrastructure. combat and reconnaissance drones, Shahed 129 and Shahed 149, Gaza, analogous to the U.S. MQ-1 Predator and MQ-9 Reaper, capable of long-endurance ISR and precision strikes. Mohajer 6, a tactical drone used for both surveillance and launching small precision-guided munitions. WW3/5, multi-role drones used for reconnaissance and as light attack platforms. Naval asymmetric weapons. Tehran's naval strategy is built on anti-access/area denial, a 2/AD, to close the Strait of Hormuz. Naval mines. Estimates suggest Iran has 5,000 to 6,000 mines, including smart variants that can be deployed by submarines or civilian dhows to halt global shipping. Anti-ship ballistic missiles, ASBMs, Khalij Fairs, Persian Gulf, a supersonic solid-fuel missile designed to hit moving ships at sea. Hormuz 1 and Hormuz 2, specialized versions designed for anti-radar and anti-ship roles respectively. Anti-ship cruise missiles, ASCMS, Qatar and Ghadir, long-range cruise missiles up to 300 kilometers that can be launched from shore-based mobile batteries. Nasser 1, a short-range missile for swarm attacks by fast boats. Subsurface assets, Ghadir-class midget submarines, nearly silent and difficult to detect in shallow Gulf waters, used for mine-laying and torpedo ambushes. Fada-class submarine, a domestically built semi-heavy submarine capable of launching torpedoes and cruise missiles. Fast attack craft, FAC, fleets of speedboats armed with rockets, torpedoes, or explosives for kamikaze surface attacks. To protect its territory from U.S. air power, Iran uses a multi-layered domestic shield. Bavar 373, Iran's premier long-range SAM system, claimed to rival the Russian S-400 in its ability to track stealth aircraft and ballistic missiles. Khordad 15, a mid to long-range system capable of engaging up to 6 targets simultaneously. Mirsad in Talash, domestic upgrades of older Western and Soviet tech for medium-altitude defense. To counter U.S. stealth fighters, F-35, F-22, Iran relies on high-speed interceptors and its new Russian-made multi-role jets. Sukhoi Su-35SE Flanker E, Iran's most modern asset. As of early 2026, initial batches have been delivered. These 4++ generation jets are equipped with Irbis-E radar and long-range R-37M missiles designed to engage targets from distances where they might outrange older U.S. platforms. F-14 AM Tomcat. Iran is the world's only operator of the Tomcat. They have been domestically upgraded, AM, advanced modernized, to carry the Fakor 90, a reverse-engineered AIM-54 Phoenix with a 150 kilometers plus range, specifically intended to pick off U.S. support aircraft, tankers and AWACS from a distance. MiG-29, Fulcrum, used primarily for point defense of Tehran. These have been upgraded with domestic avionics and can now carry the Nasser 1 anti-ship missile for coastal defense roles. In a conflict, these would be used for hit-and-run missions against regional U.S. bases or to strike carrier strike groups. Su-24MK, Fencer, Iran's primary long-range deep strike bomber. It can carry heavy laser-guided bombs and the KH-58 anti-radiation missile to target U.S. radar installations. F-4D/E Phantom II. Despite their age, these remain the workhorse of the IRIAF. They have been modified to carry the Qatar and Nasser anti-ship cruise missiles, turning the aging fighter bombers into a significant maritime threat in the narrow Strait of Hormuz. Su-22, Fitter. Operated by the IRGC, these have been modernized to carry precision-guided munitions, PGMs, and are frequently seen in exercises practicing low-altitude pop-up attacks on naval targets. These are reverse-engineered from the U.S. F-5 Tiger II airframe and used for light attack and pilot training. Hessa Kausar, a fourth-generation jet based on the F-5, featuring a digital cockpit and domestic fire control systems. Hisa Saike, easily identified by its twin canted tails, similar to an F-18. It is utilized for close air support and reconnaissance, used for coastal defense, troop insertion, and swarm support for naval fast boats. MIL-28NE, Night Hunter. Newly delivered from Russia in early 2026. This heavy attack helicopter is designed for all-weather, day/night operations with high-precision anti-tank missiles, Ataka series. AH-1J Sea Cobra, Tufan. Reverse-engineered and upgraded U.S. Cobras. The Tufan 2 variant features improved optics, and the Tufan TOW missile for targeting armored vehicles or small ships. Mi-17 HIP. The backbone of Iranian transport, often modified with rocket pods and used by the IRGC for air mobile commando operations. Let's check out strategic support and special mission. P-3F Orion, used for long-range maritime patrol. It tracks U.S. carrier movements and can coordinate over-the-horizon missile strikes from shore-based batteries. Boeing 707/747 tankers, essential for extending the reach of the F-14 and Su-24 fleets. In a conflict, these would be high-priority targets for U.S. forces. Ilyushin Raycher L-76, the primary heavy lifter used for rapid deployment of personnel and logistics to regional axis of resistance fronts. Tensions are rising in the Middle East. Iran has stated that it is fully ready to respond to any further attacks, warning that it will defend itself against renewed hostilities. Armed groups aligned with Tehran in Yemen and Iraq have echoed this message, pledging to intervene if Iran comes under direct assault. In one notable escalation of rhetoric, the Houthi movement released footage implying a potential strike against the USS Abraham Lincoln, signaling an intent to threaten U.S. naval forces operating in the region. Despite this posture, Iran's conventional air power remains a significant weakness. Decades of sanctions and limited access to spare parts have left the Iranian Air Force operating an increasingly obsolete mix of combat aircraft, many of them aging platforms acquired decades ago. In terms of numbers and capability, this force pales in comparison to the modern fighter wings carried by a single U.S. aircraft carrier. Where Tehran has sought to offset this imbalance is through its missile programs. Iran has invested heavily in developing a broad and layered missile inventory that includes short, medium, and intermediate-range ballistic missiles, land attack and anti-ship cruise missiles, and more recently, hypersonic systems. Weapons traveling at hypersonic speeds, above Mach 5, compress warning and response times, posing serious challenges for even advanced air and missile defenses. Iranian officials claim that systems such as the Fateh-2, which reportedly uses a hypersonic glide vehicle, are already operational. In addition, several Iranian ballistic missiles have been modified to strike maritime targets. This capability was indirectly demonstrated in 2024, when Houthi forces employed Iranian-supplied missiles and drones against commercial shipping and naval vessels in the Gulf of Aden. However, confronting an American carrier strike group is an entirely different level of conflict. In this video, Defense Updates analyzes why Iran can't do much against USS Abraham Lincoln. Before we proceed, a word on NordVPN, which is one of the most trusted and fastest VPN money-back guarantee. Nimitz-class aircraft carriers rank among the largest warships ever built, yet their size does not translate into sluggish performance. Driven by nuclear propulsion, these vessels are capable of sustained speeds of roughly 35 miles per hour, about 56 kilometers per hour, allowing them to reposition rapidly across vast stretches of ocean. Despite their immense dimensions, locating and tracking a carrier at sea is far more difficult than it may appear. In the open ocean, a carrier has enormous room to maneuver. Once an adversary reports a sighting, uncertainty grows quickly. Within just 30 minutes, the potential operating area of the ship can expand to nearly 900 square miles, and after an hour, that uncertainty balloons to roughly 4,000 square miles. Compounding the challenge, nuclear-powered carriers do not require regular refueling, enabling them to maintain unpredictable movement patterns for extended periods. Even when a long-range missile threat is introduced, the problem remains complex for an attacker. A missile with a reach of around 1,000 kilometers, 620 miles, and a top speed of Mach 3 would take approximately 16 minutes to reach its target at maximum range. During that time, a carrier can continue maneuvering, altering course and speed while coordinating layered defensive measures, including last-second evasive actions. Striking a fixed installation on land is fundamentally different from engaging a mobile, well-defended supercarrier. Unlike a stationary target, an aircraft carrier is constantly moving, actively employing deception, speed, and defensive tactics to complicate targeting. Successfully hitting such a vessel requires far more than range and speed. It demands precise, real-time tracking against a target that is doing everything possible to avoid being hit. A U.S. Navy supercarrier such as USS Abraham Lincoln operates within a dense, multi-layered defensive envelope designed to intercept and destroy incoming threats at various ranges. Its close-in protection suite includes systems such as the RIM-7 Sea Sparrow, the RIM-116 rolling airframe missile, and the Phalanx Close-In Weapon System, CIWS. The RIM-7 Sea Sparrow is a ship-launched, short-range surface-to-air missile intended to counter hostile aircraft and incoming missiles. It provides point defense at distances of roughly 20 kilometers, about 12 miles, forming one of the inner layers of a carrier's air defense. Complementing this is the RIM-116 RAM, a compact, fast-reacting missile that uses infrared guidance to home in on its target. Designed specifically to defeat anti-ship cruise missiles, RAM serves as a highly effective last-line missile interceptor with an engagement range of approximately 10 kilometers, 6.2 miles. At the very end of the defensive chain sits the Phalanx CIWS, a fully automated, radar-directed Gatling gun system. Intended as a final safeguard, Phalanx engages threats that have penetrated all other defenses, firing up to 4,500 rounds per minute and engaging targets at distances of around 3.5 kilometers, 2.2 miles. The supercarrier embarks CVW-9 carrier air wing consisting of 8 squadrons flying F-35C, Lightning II, FA-18EF, Super Hornets, EA-18G Growlers, E-2D Hawkeyes, CMV-22B Ospreys, and MH-60RS Seahawks. Aided by E-2 Hawkeye, which is a carrier-based AWACS aircraft, the F-35C, Super Hornet, and Growler can take out incoming threats like drones with air-to-air missiles, such as AIM-9X. Importantly, the carrier does not rely on its own defenses alone. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers escorting the carrier contribute their own missile interceptors, sensors, and combat systems, creating overlapping coverage from multiple directions. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers have 96 VLS cells. These can be configured with a variety of air defense missiles like SM-2MR Block 3B, SM-3, SM-6, as well as ESSM, or Evolved Sea Sparrow missile that can counter drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles. Given this layered architecture, experts widely assess that Iranian missile systems would struggle to penetrate such defenses, even if launched in large numbers. The same assessment applies to unmanned aerial systems, which are particularly vulnerable to integrated air defenses. Undersea threats are also constrained. Iran's submarine force, including aging Kilo-class diesel-electric boats, is considered relatively noisy by modern standards and would likely be detected and tracked by U.S. Navy Virginia-class attack submarines accompanying the carrier, long before posing a serious threat. U.S. Navy supercarriers Nimitz or Ford are very resilient. On June 18, 2021, the U.S. Navy conducted the first major explosive test on USS Gerald R. Ford as part of its Full Ship Shock Trials FSST program, marking a critical milestone in evaluating the survivability of the Navy's newest aircraft carrier. As part of the trial, the U.S. military detonated an underwater explosive charge weighing roughly 20 metric tons, about 40,000 pounds, in close proximity to the carrier. The resulting shockwave was so intense that it registered 3.9 on the Richter scale, an effect comparable to the simultaneous detonation of around 100 modern depth charges. Such shock events are designed to replicate the kinds of forces a warship could experience in combat, whether from anti-ship missiles, naval mines, torpedoes, or even secondary explosions caused by nearby vessels being struck. The goal of FSST is not limited to testing hull strength alone. It also examines how critical systems, including propulsion, electronics, combat systems, and even components associated with the nuclear reactors, perform under extreme stress. Over a 4-month testing period, USS Gerald R. Ford was subjected to 3 separate underwater detonations, each conducted progressively closer to the ship to increase the severity of the shock. The final and most demanding explosion took place on August 8, 2021, concluding the FSST campaign. According to the ship's commanding officer at the time, Captain Paul Lancilata, the results were unequivocal. He reported no catastrophic system failures, no uncontrolled flooding, and no fires during the trials, an outcome that underscored the carrier's robust design and resilience. These results highlight a key reality of modern naval warfare. Disabling a U.S. supercarrier would likely require a direct and highly precise strike. Near misses and blast effects alone are unlikely to be sufficient. Given this standard, the prospect of Iranian missile systems achieving such accuracy, especially in an environment saturated with electronic warfare and jamming, remains highly questionable, particularly when many of those missiles rely on relatively basic guidance technologies.
The regime is completely cornered from the north and south. The situation in the south is dire. President Trump's massive American armada, launched under the codename Midnight Tug, has descended upon the throat of the Strait of Hormuz to cut off Iran's oil lifeline and strangle the regime. Cornered and on the verge of suffocation, the mullahs in Tehran are about to make the biggest and final mistake of their history by locking their 80,000 suicide drones onto the American fleet. However, for the Iranian regime, the term nightmare scenario is no longer limited to American aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf. In the north, a single signature from Baku wiped out Tehran's century-old strategic depth doctrine overnight, and it turned the regime into a defenseless, naked target. To understand the architecture of this strategic encirclement and the trapped situation Iran finds itself in, we must first turn our gaze northward, to Baku. The first and most deadly nail hammered into Tehran's coffin came not from Washington or Tel Aviv, but from the shores of the Caspian Sea, which Iran considers its brother and claims to be historically connected to. Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev accepted Donald Trump's personal invitation and officially joined the US-led Peace Council. This move created a shockwave that disrupted all of Iran's regional security calculations. This is not a simple membership in an international organization or a diplomatic gesture. The official invitation letter sent by Donald Trump and the massive $1 billion entry fee Aliyev committed to pay to join this structure mark a historic turning point, confirming Baku's place in the New World Order established post-Gaza.
Thank you. Teşekkür ederim.
Firmly aligned with the Washington-Tel Aviv axis and at the very forefront. For Iran, the northern border is no longer a secure backyard, a trade route, or a lifeline. It has become a massive NATO base, where guns are pointed at them and their every move is monitored. For Iran, the word Azerbaijan represents much more than a diplomatic neighbor. It represents a vein pulsing at the very heart of the regime, one that could stop at any moment. The reality of South Azerbaijan and Tabriz's positioning as a potential bastion of freedom against the regime is not just an internal matter. It is a geopolitical bomb that could destroy all the power balances in the region. Baku's deepening strategic partnership with Washington and Tel Aviv is analyzed in this context not only as military cooperation, but also as the pulling of a strategic pin that could remove the northern provinces, Iran's industrial heartland and home to millions of Azeri Turks, from Tehran's control. Looking at the historical perspective, what is happening today is actually the backdrop of a century-long reckoning. Iran's region, referred to as South Azerbaijan, is not just a geographical piece. It is the main engine of Iran's industrial capacity, agricultural production, and human resources. Tabriz is not just a city north of Tehran, it is the cornerstone of the regime's economic and cultural existence. This new and disruptive alliance established by Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev with Washington has the potential to awaken this vast population, which Iran views as occupied territories and has kept under pressure for decades with assimilation policies. From an analytical perspective, Tabriz is not just an Iranian city. It is the ancient memory center of Azerbaijani Turkish culture and history. Today, within Iran's borders, the Azeri Turkish population living in the region, defined as South Azerbaijan, numbering over 30 million, has always been coded as a difficult force to manage and a potential internal security variable for the Persian-centered administration in Tehran. It is believed that decades of centralist policies, restrictions on language, and imbalances in the distribution of economic resources have brought the accumulated social energy in the region to the brink of explosion. Baku's military confidence gained after 2020, triggering a sense of historical identity echoing in the streets of Tabriz, constitutes one of the regime's greatest existential concerns. For Tehran, the real trapped situation is the possibility that this massive population bloc in the north could sever its ties with the regime in the event of a possible external intervention. Analysts point out that in a scenario where Tabriz takes its demands for autonomy or integration with Baku to the streets, the Iranian army could experience internal divisions and logistical lines could be paralyzed. Every diplomatic step taken by Azerbaijan acts as a catalyst that could activate this social fault line. Tabriz is now on its way to becoming a strategic pressure point that holds the regime's decision-making processes hostage, rather than a city managed by Tehran. Baku's formalization of its relations with the US and Israel and new defense agreements worth billions of dollars are significantly undermining Iran's claim to strategic depth. Advanced radar stations and signal intelligence facilities deployed along the border can now serve as a glass wall for Washington and Tel Aviv to monitor Iran's interior. Iran's northern provinces are the center of the country's automotive, heavy machinery, and technological production capacity. The industrial regions around Tabriz are the main arteries of the regime's struggle for economic survival. The closure of northern trade routes or the loss of security of energy transmission lines could push economic pressure on Tehran to an unbearable point. Ilham Aliyev's resolute stance in the international arena is interpreted as him being aware of this massive ethnic and economic leverage. Although the regime attempts to threaten Baku militarily, it actually fears the social chaos that would be created by the awakening of its own 30 million-strong population. With this move, Azerbaijan has turned the regime's weakest point, its own ethnic and economic dynamics, into a strategic deterrent. Azerbaijan's multi-layered chess move has not only put Iran in a military vice, but also forced it to confront its own historical and social realities. Although the doors of diplomacy remain open in this geopolitical tension, the military buildup and ethnic dynamics on the ground indicate that the regime faces the risk of either radical change or inevitable fragmentation. For Iran, the north is no longer a secure backyard. It is a strategic front that could erupt at any moment. Meanwhile, the potential for physical destruction is rising from the south, from the increasingly heated waters of the Persian Gulf. The operational force that President Trump himself has dubbed Midnight Hammer is not there to shift the regional balance of power, but to completely destroy it.
Iranian regime, Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan.
The USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, which has arrived in the region, is not just a show of force or a diplomatic stick, but a mobile doomsday machine. Faced with this overwhelming technological and military superiority, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards are playing their only card, the most primitive but most dangerous one: saturation attack. According to shocking figures confirmed by Israeli and Western intelligence services and chilling military analysts, Iran has 80,000 fully assembled suicide drones and various Shahed variants ready for launch. This is an unprecedented swarm threat in modern warfare history. What is currently happening over the Gulf of Oman and the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most tense, nerve-wracking cat-and-mouse games in modern history. The IRGC is sending its Seeper 251 surveillance and kamikaze drones on suicide dives to pinpoint the coordinates of the USS Abraham Lincoln, test the ship's air defense systems, and, if possible, inflict even symbolic damage on the ship. Tehran's strategy is based on a fatal and foolish misconception that even the slightest damage to an American ship will scare Washington and bring it to the negotiating table, rather than achieving a military victory. With its limited, outdated technology dating back to the 1980s, the regime is hastening its own demise by challenging the world's most advanced, integrated war machine. This is not a defense strategy. It is the military preparation for a regime's collective suicide ritual. Caught in a pincer movement between Azerbaijan to the north and the US Navy to the south, this military pressure in Iran has created a domino effect on the home front, triggering social and logistical chaos. While generals in Tehran, Revolutionary Guard commanders, and the seemingly untouchable religious leadership appear on screens calling on the public to resist and martyr themselves, they themselves have put into action a very different, much safer survival plan. The latest leaked intelligence reports and satellite analysis confirm that Ayatollah Khamenei and senior IRGC commanders have retreated to deep underground bunkers carved into the mountains around Tehran and Dezful, moving their command centers hundreds of meters below ground. This escape is the most concrete, most shameful proof of how empty the tales of courage and sacrifice the regime has been selling to its own base for 40 years really are. While the leaders tremble in secure tunnels to protect themselves from American bunker-buster bombs, they have not the slightest hesitation in pushing the people into the path of incoming missiles and economic ruin. Unfortunately, the IRGC's defense doctrine is based on dirty, inhumane tactics straight out of the playbook of cornered terrorist organizations, not modern rules of war or an honorable army. In order to be able to spread civilian massacre propaganda in the event of a possible American or Israeli airstrike, and to manipulate Western public opinion, The regime is moving political prisoners from prisons and, even more horrifyingly, the bodies of executed regime opponents to critical points in military bases next to ammunition depots. This human shield strategy is a much larger, more organized, and more violent copy of previously seen tactics. Their goal is very clear: to create a diplomatic protective shield by prompting headlines in Western media such as "America is targeting civilians." However, this move lays bare, in all its brutality, the regime's view of its own people not as citizens, but merely as statistics, propaganda material, and expendable human flesh. When we look at the big picture, at the entire strategic map, we see that beyond the military siege, the move that truly finished Iran was made on the diplomatic chessboard. This is not just a preparation for war. It is an operation by regional powers to completely remove the Iranian regime from the equation and consign it to the dustbin of history. Saudi Arabia's historic decision to officially designate the Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, as an armed organization, a move that fundamentally alters the regional balance of power, has stripped Tehran of its legitimacy in the Islamic world. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's message to the world, and especially to Tehran, that "I will shoot down anyone who uses my airspace," goes beyond diplomatic courtesy and declares that the biggest air defense shield that Iranian missiles must overcome to reach Israeli or US bases has been established by a Muslim neighbor itself. Riyadh has shed its years-long cautious policy and mask of neutrality, taking its place as a silent but deadly partner in the coalition pulling the strings of the regime. With this decision, Saudi Arabia has blasted and destroyed Iran's claim to be the leader of the Islamic world. Turkey's position and activity on the ground is the clearest, most indisputable harbinger of the impending collapse, the end of the regime. Ankara's move beyond military buildup on the Iranian border, along the Van and Hakkari line, to preparations for establishing a buffer zone, and its commencement of building field hospitals and refugee camps carries a very heavy, very clear meaning in diplomatic language. If a neighboring state establishes refugee camps just beyond its border before the war has even begun, this does not mean, "I will save you." It means, "I am waiting for your downfall." The fact that Turkish intelligence, namely the MIT, is simultaneously conducting sweep operations against IRGC cells within the country and rounding up agents one by one, shows that Ankara has long accepted the regime's fall and is preparing for post-chaos scenarios and the period after regime change. Turkey has now coded the Tehran administration not as a sovereign state to be dealt with, but as a regional risk that must be managed. Azerbaijan's participation in the US-led Peace Council has been the final move to lock the northern wing of this diplomatic vice, cutting off Iran's lifeline. Ilham Aliyev's statement in Davos and his $1 billion commitment.
So I'm not concerned about war. What I'm concerned of is miscalculations and military operation based on misinformation and disinformation campaigns. It is obvious to us that there are certain elements, certain parties who want to drag President Trump into this war for their own benefits. And I think President Trump is wise enough to make a correct decision.
How can a meaningful negotiations process be jump-started right now?
A meaningful negotiation should be based on trust. And unfortunately, we have lost our trust to the United States as a negotiating partner. We need to overcome this mistrust. There are now some intermediators, some friendly countries in the region who are trying to build this confidence. It is difficult, but they are trying. So I see the possibility of another talk if the US negotiation team follows what President Trump said, to come to a fair and equitable deal to ensure that there is no nuclear weapons.
So if this confidence is built, if you get to that stage, you are ready and willing to sit down directly with the American side, with someone like Witkoff, and talk?
No, the question of directly and indirectly is something else. That is the form of negotiation, and we have to.
But that's what they say they want. That.
Yes, but we have to take care of the substance of negotiation, and that is more important.
Yeah, and President Trump says that negotiations are already going on. He has said overnight that there is negotiations taking place. How does that work right now with this confidence building, with countries in the region also helping?
That is through intermediators. As I said, there are some countries who convey messages and who are trying to build confidence and to prepare the ground for a meaningful negotiation. And we are working with them, and we are exchanging messages.
Would you say that these talks that are going on right now are fruitful and can lead to a de-escalation of the situation to a point where real talks can take place?
I think so far, yes, fruitful.
Things like enrichment, things like ballistic missiles, things like proxy forces in the region. I know that the United States has talked about wanting to negotiate about that as well. Is that completely out of the question for you, or is that something you could at least talk about?
President Trump said no nuclear weapons, and we fully agree with that. That could be a very good deal. Of course, in return, we expect sanction lifting. So that deal is possible. Let's do not talk about impossible things.
What do you think the consequences would be if there was a full-on military confrontation between Iran and the United States? Because I know your military has changed its doctrine, that if there is a major attack, it would be considered existential for the Islamic Republic. What would that mean for the region here?
If war starts, that would be a disaster for everybody. In the previous war, we tried hard to limit the scope of war between Iran and Israel. This time, if it is between Iran and the U.S., since the U.S. bases are spread all over the region, then inevitably, many parts of the region would be involved, engaged, and that could be very dangerous. Our missiles were tested in a real war last time, and we were able to, understand their problems, their weak points, and their strengths. So we learned many lessons from those 12 days of war, and I think we are now very well prepared. But again, being prepared doesn't mean that we want war. We want to prevent a war.
President Trump said he's also concerned about the rights of those who are in custody. As you know, he said that he believes that he prevented hangings from taking place here in Iran. Can you guarantee the rights of those who have been detained and whose cases are being looked into right now?
Of course. First of all, there was no plan for executions or hangings. So there were no plan as such. And right now, I can, affirm that the right of each and every person who is arrested and detained would be observed and guaranteed.
You see, sometimes they talk about war, and I do not know what they intend to do with their planes. But this is nothing new. In the past, the Americans have repeatedly threatened, in their own words, that all options are on the table. That is, every option, including the option of war. Now, this gentleman repeatedly claims that they have brought in aircraft. What have we actually done in response? I believe the people of Iran should not be frightened by such things. The people of Iran are not influenced by these statements, and they are not truly afraid. We are not the initiators. We do not want to oppress anyone. We do not want to attack any country. But when faced with someone who is greedy, who wants to attack, who wants to inflict harm, the people of Iran will stand as a strong, powerful opponent. Of course, the Americans should know that if they wage war this time, it will be a regional war. Iran has many attractions. Iran's oil is an attraction. Iran's gas is an attraction. The rich mines of Iran are an attraction. The strategic and geographical position of Iran is an attraction. They want to take possession of this country, just as they did before. For over 30 years, the Americans were in Iran. The resources were in their hands, the oil was in their hands, the politics, security, and global relations were in their hands. They did whatever they wanted for 30 years. Their hand has been cut off. They want to return to the same state as the Pahlavi era. The nation of Iran has stood firm, shielding itself, and acts as an obstacle. The rest of the talk about human rights and such are just worthless words they say. The issue is this: they have greed, and Iran stands firm. It will continue to stand firm, and God willing, it will make the other side despair of its malice and harassment.
Look, we have a lot of things happening right now with Iran. We have a
So amid the threat of war, a series of blasts has spread panic in Iran. Reports of explosions in 7 cities, including Tehran, have increased the tension of the IRGC. Following the blast, which occurred amid fears of U.S. attacks, there is panic throughout Iran. Dorian, how did the situation suddenly escalate? What was claimed? The report. News of explosions in 7 Iranian cities has caused a sudden panic, an atmosphere of fear among the people. Amid threats of war from the U.S., Iran has been shaken by the explosions. Serial blasts occurred from Tehran to Bandar Abbas. A cloud of smoke billowed in the sky and cries filled the streets. There has been no concrete information about the cause of the blasts. Consequently, various rumors are spreading. After the serial blasts, people are gripped by the fear that some major secret mission has begun in Iran. It is being claimed that explosions occurred in the capital, Tehran, Bandar Abbas, Perant, Tak, Tabriz, Qom, Ahvaz, and Natanz. The explosions in various cities created panic throughout Iran. The situation worsened amid reports of blasts, leading to the activation of the air defense system in Tehran. The entire area reverberated with loud noise, further increasing people's fear. In addition to Tehran, this defense system was activated in several other cities, with sirens sounding continuously for several hours.
All right, moving on. Amid heightened speculation over American military strikes in Iran, a U.S.
Air Force plane called the Nuke Sniffer has landed at the Mildenhall U.S. Air Base in Britain. The deployment has heightened speculation that it could be related to Iran. Officially called the WC-135R Constant Phoenix jet, the Nuke Sniffer is used to detect radiation leaks into the atmosphere on account of nuclear explosions or related incidents. The aircraft is operated by U.S.'s 45th Reconnaissance Squadron. The Nuke Sniffer was last deployed at the Mildenhall Air Base weeks before Russia began its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The aircraft's past deployments have been closely linked to nuclear accidents and nuclear tests. It was deployed in 1986 after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, and in 2011 after the Fukushima nuclear power plant incident. The aircraft has also been deployed for every confirmed North Korean nuclear test. It was last seen at the start of the Ukraine-Russia war in 2022. According to a report by The Telegraph, U.S. Special Forces were also seen rehearsing military drills and fast roping from the V-22 Osprey helicopter. Flight tracking data suggests that the U.S. has also brought more aircraft closer to the region, including more advanced fighter jets and tankers. Earlier this week, U.S. President Trump had declared that Iran must abandon its nuclear program or face a far worse attack than the strike on its nuclear facilities last year. He declared time was running out and urged Iran to make a deal. During the 12-day war in June last year, U.S. B-2 bombers had struck key Iranian nuclear facilities, including the heavily fortified Fordo nuclear facility. With the Nuke Sniffer landing in the UK, speculation is rife that an attack on Iran is imminent. U.S. has gathered a massive military force in the region, but reports say Trump is still considering his options. The U.S. has also increased its naval presence in the region to 10 warships, including the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. Iran has threatened to instantly strike U.S. bases and aircraft carriers in response to any attack.
Right now, the United States has crossed into territory no president, no court, and no Congress has ever entered before. A federal judge has just taken an action that has never occurred in American history. While a federal criminal trial was still actively underway, that judge formally transmitted impeachment evidence directly to the United States Congress. Not a summary, not an opinion, not a recommendation, the evidence itself. This did not happen during Watergate. It did not happen to Nixon. It did not happen during Clinton. It has never happened until now. And tonight, Washington is reacting as if it understands exactly what this means. National Guard units are deploying across the Capitol. Security perimeters are going up. Lawmakers are being briefed behind closed doors. And the political system is moving at emergency speed. This is not politics. This is not cable news drama. This is a constitutional system activating under extreme stress. Just hours before this unprecedented judicial referral, something else happened that shocked even veteran court watchers. Federal marshals physically removed Donald Trump's entire legal team from a federal courtroom.
Hello my friends and welcome. Let's start this one from the frontline updates. Zaporizhia direction, Russia advanced with a gray zone towards Ternuvata, but I already told you that this attack totally failed for Russians. They also went with the main forces, at least they tried, to Priluki to cut this road between Dobropilia and those old settlements. By the way, the Ukrainian defense line is also over here. Also, they tried to send the reinforcements towards Hulaypole, but they were met with the Ukrainian counter-strike, drone counter-strike as usual, because everything in the drone kill zone is being identified and later on flatlined by Ukraine. So here is the Russian convoy. The vehicles that have no armor, at least 4 of them, were spotted by Ukrainian drone operators, and our guys launched the suppression fire, so mostly those are Ural trucks. And you can see the amazed faces in a thermal camera, even we can see that of the Russian soldiers who understood what is up to happen. There were coordinated actions of Ukrainian drone drop operators and Ukrainian FPV drone operators. The convoy was ambushed both from above and from the sides. Then Ukrainian surveillance operators, they spot this juicy target of several of the vehicles. Immediately there is the command for multiple of the drone units to launch everything they have in some certain place. Yeah, FPV drone, and here's the Ural truck, no cages, nothing, it's not a Mad Max style vehicle, so it was disabled, I'm sure, with a single strike. Yeah, this video is published on a thermal camera, but still I cannot show you it fully. I uploaded it on my Telegram channel, you may check it out in the video description. I think that for storytelling it would be enough if I show you what just happened to this Russian convoy with those images available here. It was beautiful, absolutely astonishing operation done by our warriors, our defenders, and Russians. They cannot send reinforcements even to the occupied settlements, as partially they occupied Guyana. It also means that they have some of the issues with supply deliveries, because Ukrainian drone kill zone is at least 20 kilometers behind the actual front line. In Pakrovsk direction we also have multiple of the videos of how Ukrainian operators work. The settlement is full already of the Russian soldiers, the southern part of it, where they hide in the basements. Also sometimes in apartments, ruined buildings and so on, but they cannot stay there forever and then they go outside if they're being spotted. The result is visible on your screens. This drone job was shared today by Ukrainian SBU. Not only they hit Russian facilities far behind the front lines, also in occupied regions like for example Crimea, where they recently disclosed the images from 2025 of how they hit multiple of the Russian airplanes, but they also operate on the front line, right in Pokrovsk. The thing is that there is still no cure to shut down drones. This was published today also by Ukrainian side. This was the Russian drone, and luckily our guy from the first shot was successful in downing this Russian FPV, but still there is no robust solution, because sometimes drones they fly at the very high speed. It's very hard to aim it, especially with the standard rifle. Shotguns they help more because of the shrapnel, but not always. There were some of the solutions with anti-drone nets that soldiers might fire with the help of the separate gun, but it's one more tool, yeah, one more weight, one more feature, and you need to have the time to reach for it and shoot from specific direction, and if there is more than a single drone, so it's always risky. There are huge risks on the front lines, and to move closer to the front lines, because not just Ukraine established the kill zone, but also Russia. The kill zone itself is not everywhere. Magyar wants to make it elsewhere, but for now it is available in some of the directions, the most hot directions, like for example Guyana, Pokrovsk, Konstantinovka, not far away from Kupiansk, where Ukrainian drone operators are the most effective. But in the other places, Ukraine is limited with its resources. By the way, Russia too, because they have one capable unit. It is Rubicon. The rest are here and there. So for them, it's also a difficult task to target Ukrainian infrastructure. One more video of a drone shot down by our guys. Again, very brief action, and right away the drone was kaputted. But there is also the part of luck in those kind of the shots. You see that the electronic warfare is out there, lots of the antennas, but they didn't help. Only the kinetic bullets, they help to intercept the drones. And still, unfortunately, there is no robust variant of how to shut down drones with 100% accuracy. Jesus Christ, one more penguin, guys. One more penguin was hit by Ukrainian drone operators. Yeah, the third one. Russians are trying to use their soldiers just for the tests of those anti-drone suits. The penguin was just lying there on the road, but it was spotted. And somewhere on the front lines you see the snow is here and there. There is the grass, and even this white cover doesn't save. Russians call it an anti-drone poncho. It is for sale in the Russian markets, and definitely it looks like a penguin suit. Yeah, this is the previous penguin, kind of the bad advertisement for this suit production company. Alright, for the first time we have the evacuation of the ground unmanned vehicle by another ground unmanned vehicle. That happened somewhere in Pokrovsk direction. Ukrainian Brigade Rubish performed this evacuation operation. You see, it was successful. They tightened somehow. Yeah, one GUV to other GUV and continue the movement. It looks like not just the vehicle itself was carried out, but also cargo inside. What was there? It's hard to say from this perspective. But this operation was to be conducted. Yeah, this video comes from the Russian channels, and the Russian official media made the report about those courier drones. So the ground devices which are remotely controlled, they have the automatic grenade launcher, they have machine guns, very effective tools actually. Some of the logistic drones as well, with huge wheels and good off-road capabilities, and the Russian Orthodox Church. Oh, this weapon should kill like, it's not Christianity out there in Russian army, for sure. They bless the weapons to kill people. How is it Christianity? Yeah, Russia develops those ground unmanned vehicles, ground robots, ground drones, so you may call different names, but Ukraine still has many more compared to the Russian army. In Russia, they have ideas, but implementation is really terrible compared to Ukraine. But plus for Russia that they have more potential than Ukraine. So if they get to some of the idea, if it is working, they will invest lots of the money there. And they will have absolutely massive production, as it happened with the Lancet drones, with Shahed drones, and also those units to make gliding aviation bombs from the standard aviation bombs, and it was in a way decisive. You know, on the front lines, then Russia, with the help of those gliding bombs, just flatlined some of the Ukrainian positions in those vast areas, several districts, several of the buildings, with the help of the really huge aviation gliding bombs. Ukraine doesn't have that kind of the resource to upscale the production that massively, but Ukraine has access to the Western technologies, not just Chinese, and Ukraine is looking for new ideas more often than Russia. So it's quite logical that now they show a couple of those robots there as the advertisement for now. We'll see if they are capable really to upscale the production. I'm sure that there are lots of the non-Russian made components, not just Chinese, but also made in Western Europe, in the United States of America, elsewhere, because Russia still has those components for their drones and cruise missiles. Well, this drone is very similar to Ukrainian-produced drone. They're mostly the same, I would say. Well, we'll see how the war might develop in the future, but the drone war is already out there. I wonder what are those tablets. Well, it seems like those are custom-made, especially for those robots. Maybe China made tablets because China helps even with the Russian Oreshnik missile to produce components and equipment also to produce those spare parts for the missile. Well, sometimes Russians are capable to bypass Ukrainian defense lines, especially when those were not built before effectively, like for example we have in the Kupiansk direction. A couple of the Russian soldiers were spotted, some of them surrendered on the way, one in Kurlivka, and the other one proceeded behind the Kupiansk Uzlovy, not being spotted. This is a pure suicide mission, and this Russian soldier advanced with the Russian flag, was spotted in multiple of the directions. Ukraine tried to chase the soldier, but all the time he was like sneaky peeky, went to some of the buildings, and still Ukraine is searching for the guy. So basically the task of those few groups of Russians which are just walking there, bypassing Ukrainian defense, is to show that Gerasimov was correct, that Kupiansk-Uzlovy is under the Russian control. If they show the Russian flag to the drone and this image will be sent to Gerasimov and other Russian generals, they might confirm their presence in Kupiansk-Uzlovy, and Putin might say that thousands of Ukrainian soldiers are being just encircled. Yeah, and Russia is gaining control elsewhere. That's the surrealism of the current war. Or it's better to say surrealism of the Russian military command. Because of the absence of the real victories, they draw the fake ones. As it was from the very beginning, for example, in Kupiansk, then there was the massive flag operation that ended very terribly for the Russian army. To the other news, ограничение, so limited. Starlink is limited for Russians. Absolutely fantastic. So Russians are not capable to use their BN-35 drones equipped with the small Starlink antennas because finally Starlink company limited the signal for the objects which are moving with a speed of more than 90 kilometers an hour. It's roughly 50 miles an hour. Well, maybe 53, 55, something like that. Well, doesn't matter. Russians, they start to complain even on their channels, showing the screenshots that the Starlink is limited. They launch the drones successfully and they fail. They kaboom, they fell down, and they do not use those any longer. Well, Ukrainian channels affiliated with Ukrainian drone specialists, they say that definitely the agreement and the solution was reached, but it's the emergency solution for now. With the help of the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, finally there were some consultations to reach an immediate solution. So it's not forever, because Ukraine is also using the fast-moving targets equipped with Starlinks. The idea now is to collect all of the information about particular Starlinks which are in use by Ukrainian army, and the new Starlinks which are coming to Ukrainian army, they also should be traced with a serial number. It wasn't done before because lots of the volunteers, they just sent directly to the military branches, brigades of the soldiers they know, to do it faster. Well, now those soldiers will put numbers of antennas or emails associated with particular accounts, and this database will be shared with Starlink company itself, so those Starlinks will be fully operational. But the rest, which are not registered in this special database, will be switched off. That's the nice solution. It requires some of the time, but emergency solution is already out there. Everything which is fast-moving is staying without internet. Again, we are speaking not about entire Starlink system, but about particular region of Ukraine where Starlink system is in use. Those are the occupied regions of Ukraine and some of the Ukrainian-controlled territories. Alright, the temperature is dropping down all over Ukraine, especially in the northern and central regions. It could reach down to minus 28 degrees centigrade. At least we have this forecast from multiple of the sources. Well, on this map, it's minus 24 will be for sure tomorrow's night. And that's damn freezing. By the way, today it was the massive blackout in Ukraine in multiple of the regions, in most of the regions, because some of the power lines frozen down and electricity just cut from nuclear power plants, from substations which are connected to those. So all the day Ukrainian specialists try to solve this issue, and finally it looks like it is resolved, but the ceasefire is no longer valid. Well, the Russian side say that they will not attack Ukraine till the 1st of February. But the 1st of February included or excluded? Well, if it is excluded, that the ceasefire was just for a couple of days. And we'll see if this night Russia again may launch some of the drones on Ukraine. Hello, my friends. Missiles. Hopefully not. Alright, in this video I don't want to talk too much about American politics, but I want to touch Ukrainian topic. And there was the meeting between Vitkov, you know who is he, and also Dmitriev, representative from Putin. And here we have the comment from Vitkov himself about the meeting. So they met with Kirill Dmitriev, held productive and constructive meeting as part of the United States mediation effort towards advancing peaceful resolution of the Ukrainian conflict. Well, for me it's still nonsense how United States perform mediation effort or mediation role in this war, supplying Ukraine with some of the weapons. Yes, via the PUR program and via some other programs, but still I don't think that they can be really mediators. I'm not calling to cancel Hello my friends and welcome. The situation in Iran continued to escalate. There are more threats coming from Donald Trump. He really wants to force Ayatollah regime for some sort of the deal. He sent a huge armada, as he says, towards the shores of Iran, and definitely a nuclear air carrier Abraham Lincoln is already within the striking range from the Iranian coast. And we understand that it is the mightiest power, I mean those air carriers, that not every army has. For example, Iran converted some of the civilian ships into improvised air carriers, but they're not even close to the United States made. So the idea of Donald Trump, what he really wants to achieve, is to press Ayatollah regime. He doesn't want to change really the Ayatollah regime or to help the protesters. He wants to make a deal. He wants to force Ayatollah to stop nuclear program and stop developing ballistic missiles. Just recently, Iran published some of the videos of how they launch IRBMs, similar to Russian Oresnik missile, as they proclaim. Well, the range is limited, but still it is a step to deliver a nuclear warhead somewhere. And what Iran says about civilian nature of their nuclear program, it is not like that even close. They really enrich uranium for the military needs, and they really want to have their own nuclear bomb to intimidate other countries in the region. Not just Israel, but Israel is absolutely not okay for Iran to have nukes, and that's why it is also pushing United States for the real action. There are even some of the conspiracy theories saying that the recent release of the Epstein files was organized by Mossad to force Donald Trump for the prompt action against Iran. So they in FBI, DOJ, or whatsoever. Well, it's just a conspiracy theory, but Epstein files do really harm Donald Trump's rating a lot, and the main release happened at the same time with escalation in Middle East. That's why I understand why there is so much speculation about it. By the way, my friends, I have another channel where I filmed about
خلص تقريب جهود السلام مش هتمر تدخلوا ناس تطلعوا ناس هتتصدق
ضاربين a little bit ارجع يا الله قمت عليه يرجع.
Israel tested opening a key transit point into southern Gaza from Egypt today after nearly 2 years, preparing to allow aid trucks to bring much-needed medical and food supplies starting tomorrow. The Rafah gate will be open on a trial basis and was part of the first phase of the U.S. brokered ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. The U.S. military presence in the Middle East has been beefed up significantly amid escalating tensions with Iran. The Islamic regime's Ayatollah is warning of a possible regional war if the U.S. strikes. Fox News chief foreign correspondent Trey Yingst is in Tel Aviv, Israel, with more, including brand new remarks from President Trump on where things stand. Trey?
Shannon, good morning. Tension continues to rise across the Middle East with a growing U.S. military presence near Iran. The Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is now in CENTCOM waters in the Arabian Sea. The U.S. also continues to move aircraft and refueling planes to the region in places like Jordan and Oman, as President Trump was asked about the possibility of military action.
Where your thinking is right now with Iran, if you have made a final decision on what you want to do? I mean, I certainly can't tell you that, but we do have very big, powerful ships heading in that direction, as you know. I can't tell you. But I hope they negotiate something that's acceptable.
Amid the buildup, Iranian military leadership is continuing to threaten President Trump and the United States, while Iran's supreme leader says that if war erupts, it will be a regional war.
When you hear them talking about war, saying things like, we'll come with this plane or that plane, do this or that, it's nothing new. The Americans have threatened us repeatedly in the past, saying all options are on the table, which includes the option of war.
Iranian officials and President Trump have indicated that diplomatic talks are ongoing to avoid a direct military conflict, but some analysts say the time for diplomacy has passed. U.S. ally Israel is bracing for the possibility of war, keeping air defense systems across the country on high alert. Shifting now to Ukraine, where Russian bombardment continues. The Russians stopped bombing Ukraine's power grid for 1 week at the request of the Americans. Later this month will mark 4 years of war between the two countries.
We haven't had heating for almost 3 weeks now. Sometimes we hear that they're starting the system, meaning they drain the water and then start it up, but the radiators don't even get warm. They barely heat up at all, maybe to about 30%, and then everything just runs through the pipes.
Russian and Ukrainian negotiators are meeting later this week in the UAE to try and advance peace talks. Shannon?
All right, Trey Yingst, thank you very much.
Hey.
Sometimes they talk about war, saying we'll do such and such with such airplane. This isn't new. In the past, Americans have repeatedly threatened in their words that all options are on the table, meaning including the option of war. They always said that all options were on the table. Now this guy, Trump, also constantly claims, we brought in a navy, we did this and that. In my opinion, they shouldn't threaten the Iranian people by these things. The people of Iran will not be influenced by these words. We do not fear confrontation based on right. We are not the initiators. We do not want to do any injustice to anyone, nor do we want to attack any country. However, against anyone who harbors greed, intends to attack, or wants to make trouble, the people of Iran will deliver a strong fist to them. What's the issue with America and Iran? This confrontation that exists, Iran and America have been enemies for 40-something years. What is this issue? In my opinion, the issue can be summarized in 2 words. Those 2 words are that America wants to swallow Iran, and the valiant Iranian nation and the Islamic Republic are an obstacle. Your Iran, your country, has many attractions. Iran's oil is an attraction. Iran's gas is an attraction. Iran's rich mines are an attraction. Iran's strategic and geographical location is an attraction. There are many other characteristics. Iran is a country that naturally attracts the greedy gaze of a power-hungry, expansionist force. Iran is standing strong and will continue to stand strong, and God willing, it will disappoint those who try to provoke and harass us. The sedition, recent riots in Iran, was made by the U.S. The plot, it was a U.S. plot. Not just the U.S., but also the Zionists, the Zionist regime were involved. If I'm saying the U.S., it is not just a claim. It's not just a claim. This info hasn't reached us through secret, security, hidden, complex information channels. Of course, yes, we are aware of many of its characteristics. But what clarifies that this action, this move, was an American move is the statements of the very President of the United States. This sedition was like a coup, meaning some people in the world interpreted the sedition that occurred as a coup, saying a coup had started in Iran. The coup was suppressed, but it was a coup. What does it mean to be a coup? It means the goal was to destroy sensitive and effective centers in running the country.
Right now, somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, a U.S. aircraft carrier is moving through the waves carrying weapons so advanced they can hit targets over 300 miles away before the enemy even knows what's happening. These aren't the weapons you see in movies. These are real cutting-edge systems that have been deployed in combat zones within the last year. 5 of these weapons are so powerful they've changed the entire game of naval warfare. China knows about them. Russia knows about them. And they're terrified. Here's why. U.S. Navy aircraft carriers have always been the backbone of American military power. But what makes them truly unstoppable isn't just their size or their nuclear reactors. It's what's hidden on their decks and inside their weapons bays. The technology has advanced so much in the past 2 years that what we thought was possible 5 years ago is now completely outdated. In 2025, the Navy deployed weapons that most people don't even know exist. These aren't experimental. They're operational right now, mounted on fighter jets sitting on carrier decks in the South China Sea, the Mediterranean, and the Red Sea. These 5 weapons represent the most lethal firepower ever placed on a floating military base, and every single one of them is designed to keep America ahead of its enemies. If you think America still has the strongest military in the world, type proud in the comments below. Let's show our support for the men and women defending our freedom. A IM-174B gunslinger. Let's start with a weapon that didn't even exist 3 years ago. It's called the AIM-174B, and the Navy has given it the nickname Gunslinger. That name isn't just for show. This missile is the longest-range air-to-air weapon ever carried by an American fighter jet. We're talking about a range of over 300 miles. That's 3 times farther than the missiles our F-35s and F-22s normally carry. Here's what makes it terrifying. The AIM-174B is based on the SM-6, a ship-launched missile that's been protecting Navy destroyers for years. But the Navy took that missile, removed the booster, and modified it so FA-18 Super Hornets can carry it under their wings. Now, a single fighter jet can launch this missile from 300 miles away and take out enemy aircraft before they're even close to the carrier. This weapon made its first public appearance during the RIMPAC exercises in July 2024. Photos showed Super Hornets from the USS Carl Vinson carrying 2 of these massive missiles. At first, people thought it was just a test, but then the Navy confirmed it. The AIM-174B is fully operational. It's been deployed with Carrier Air Wing 5 in Japan, which is stationed just a few hundred miles from the Taiwan Strait. Why does that matter? Because China has been developing long-range missiles like the PL-15 and PL-17 to keep American carriers at a distance. The PL-15 has a range of about 120 miles. The AIM-174B more than doubles that. It completely flips the script. Now, American pilots can shoot down Chinese early warning aircraft and surveillance planes before China's fighters even get in range. Without those support planes, China's entire air defense strategy falls apart. But it's not just an air-to-air weapon. The AIM-174B can also hit ships and ground targets. It has a 140-pound warhead, which is 3 times bigger than a standard air-to-air missile, and it flies at Mach 3.5, which means it's almost impossible to intercept. The Navy has been testing a new version that can even shoot down hypersonic missiles. That's the level of technology we're dealing with. Here's the thing most people don't realize. This missile doesn't just protect the carrier. It changes the entire battlefield. Enemy forces can't hide behind long-range air defenses anymore because American fighters can reach out and touch them from distances they didn't think were possible. That's a game changer. F-35C Lightning II with LRASM. Now let's talk about something even more advanced. The F-35C Lightning II. You've probably heard of the F-35, but the C model is specifically designed for aircraft carriers. It's got bigger wings, a stronger landing gear, and a tailhook built for repeated carrier landings. But what makes it truly deadly isn't the plane itself, it's what it carries. In 2025, the Navy completed testing on the AGM-158C LRASM. That stands for Long Range Anti-Ship Missile. This is a stealth cruise missile designed to sink enemy warships from over 200 miles away. The F-35C can carry 2 of these externally or fit them inside its weapon's bay when stealth is critical. Here's why that matters. The LRASM doesn't need GPS to find its target. It uses infrared sensors and an onboard computer to identify enemy ships even in the middle of electronic warfare. If the enemy tries to jam its signal, it doesn't care. It keeps going. And because it's launched from a stealth fighter, the enemy doesn't even know it's coming until it's too late. The USS George Washington just deployed with F-35Cs carrying LRASMs during the Talisman Sabre exercises in July 2025. That was the first time this combination was used in a live military exercise with allies. Australia, the UK, and Japan all watched as American F-35s demonstrated the ability to hunt and destroy surface targets without ever being detected. But there's more. The F-35C isn't just a bomber. It's also a sensor platform. Its radar and infrared systems can detect enemy aircraft and ships long before they know the F-35 is there. It can then send that data to other fighters, destroyers, and even missiles in flight. That's called sensor fusion, and it turns every F-35 into a battle manager. China knows this. That's why they've been desperately trying to develop their own stealth fighters. But they're still years behind. The F-35C is already operational on 3 aircraft carriers right now. The US Carl Vinson, USS Abraham Lincoln, and US George Washington are all flying F-35Cs in the Pacific. That's a level of firepower that no other country can match. And the best part? The F-35C is getting even better. New upgrades coming in 2026 will allow it to carry 6 air-to-air missiles internally instead of 4. That's 50% more firepower without sacrificing stealth. The enemies of freedom should be very, very worried. Before we continue, Take just a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of people watch these videos without subscribing, and it costs you absolutely nothing. But it helps us bring you more content like this. So if you appreciate what we're doing here, show your support. Let's keep going. RIM-116 Rolling Airframe Missile. Now let's talk about defense. Because no matter how powerful your offensive weapons are, you have to be able to protect the carrier itself. That's where the RIM-116 Rolling Airframe Missile comes in. This is the carrier's last line of defense against incoming missiles, and it's one of the most effective point defense systems ever built. Every U.S. aircraft carrier, from the Nimitz class to the brand new Gerald R. Ford, is equipped with at least 2 Mk-49 launchers. Each launcher holds 21 RIM-116 missiles. These aren't big missiles. They're small, lightweight, and incredibly fast. But what makes them special is how they work. The RIM-116 uses a dual-mode guidance system. First, it locks onto the radio signals coming from an incoming missile. Most anti-ship missiles emit a radar signal to track their target. The RIM-116 detects that signal and flies straight toward it. Then, in the final seconds before impact, it switches to infrared guidance. That means even if the enemy tries to jam the radar, the missile still hits. And here's the kicker. The RIM-116 rolls as it flies. That's why it's called the Rolling Airframe Missile. The rolling motion allows it to use a simpler, lighter guidance system, which makes it faster and cheaper to produce. But don't let the cost fool you. This thing is lethal. In recent combat operations in the Red Sea, Navy ships equipped with RIM-116 systems successfully shot down multiple Houthi drones and cruise missiles. The U.S. Abraham Lincoln fired several of these missiles in the Pacific just last year during live fire drills. They work. And they work every single time. But carriers don't just rely on the RIM-116. They also have the Phalanx close-in weapon system. That's a radar-guided Gatling gun that fires 20mm rounds at 40 rounds per minute. If a missile gets past the RIM-116, the Phalanx shreds it to pieces. Together, these systems create a defensive bubble around the carrier that's almost impossible to penetrate. The Navy is now upgrading destroyers in the fleet to replace older Phalanx systems with even more RIM-116 launchers. That tells you how effective this weapon is. When you need to stop a supersonic anti-ship missile traveling at Mach 2, you want the RIM-116 on your side. Our sailors train with these systems constantly. They run drills, simulations, and live fire exercises to make sure that when the moment comes, they're ready. That kind of dedication and discipline is what keeps our carriers safe. And it's why no enemy has ever successfully sunk a U.S. aircraft carrier in combat. Evolved Sea Sparrow Missile Block 2. Next up is a weapon that doesn't get as much attention, but it's absolutely critical. The Evolved Sea Sparrow Missile, or ESSM Block 2. This is a medium-range missile designed to intercept incoming threats that are still too far out for the RIM-116 to handle. The ESSM Block 2 has a range of about 30 miles and can engage multiple types of targets. Cruise missiles, aircraft, drones, it doesn't matter. This missile can handle it. What makes the Block 2 version special is its active radar guidance. Older versions needed the ship's radar to guide them all the way to the target. The Block 2 can guide itself. That means the carrier can fire multiple missiles at different targets without overloading its radar systems. Carriers are equipped with Mk-29 launchers that can hold 8 ESSM missiles each. These launchers are strategically placed around the ship to provide 360-degree coverage. If an anti-ship missile is coming in low over the water, the ESSM can drop down and intercept it just a few feet above the waves. That's called sea skimming mode, and it's designed specifically to counter modern Russian and Chinese cruise missiles that fly close to the surface to avoid radar detection. The ESSM Block 2 entered service in 2020, and it's now deployed across the entire NATO alliance. That means American carriers can integrate with Allied ships and share missile defense data in real time. If a European destroyer detects a threat, it can send that information to the carrier, and the carrier can fire an ESSM before the enemy even gets close. This kind of interoperability is something our enemies simply don't have. China and Russia operate alone. They don't have the trust or the technology to share data across multiple ships and platforms. We do, and that gives us a massive advantage. In live fire tests, the ESSM Block 2 has achieved a near-perfect success rate. We're talking about hitting targets 29 out of 30 times. That level of reliability is unmatched. And when you're defending a $13 billion aircraft carrier with 5,000 sailors on board, reliability is everything. FA-18EF Super Hornet Block 3 with advanced weapons. Finally, let's talk about the workhorse of carrier aviation, the FA-18EF Super Hornet. This jet has been the backbone of Navy air power for over 20 years. But the Block 3 version that's flying today is not the same jet that first entered service in the early 2000s. It's been completely upgraded with technology that rivals fifth-generation fighters. The Block 3 Super Hornet has a new advanced cockpit display, upgraded radar, longer-range fuel tanks, and reduced radar signature. But the real power comes from what it carries. In addition to the AIM-174B we talked about earlier, the Super Hornet can carry AIM-120D AMRAAM missiles, AIM-9X Sidewinders, and the Joint Strike Missile. The AIM-120D has a range of over 100 miles and uses advanced data link systems to receive targeting updates in flight. The AIM-9X is the most maneuverable air-to-air missile in the world. It can turn on a dime and track targets even if they're behind the launching aircraft. And the Joint Strike Missile is a stealthy cruise missile designed to hit ground targets and ships from over 180 miles away. What makes the Super Hornet so valuable is its versatility. It can perform air-to-air combat, close air support, electronic warfare, and even aerial refueling. Some Super Hornets are configured purely as tankers to extend the range of other fighters. That means F-35s and other Super Hornets can fly farther and stay in the fight longer. In 2025, the Navy took delivery of 191 new F-35s, but the Super Hornet isn't going anywhere. The Navy plans to keep flying upgraded Block 3 models well into the 2040s. Why? Because they work, they're reliable, they're proven in combat, and pilots love flying them. During recent operations in the Red Sea, Super Hornets from the U.S Dwight D. Eisenhower flew over 15,000 combat hours without a single loss. They shot down Houthi drones, struck ground targets, and provided air cover for Allied ships. That's the kind of combat-proven performance you can't get from a computer simulation. And here's something most people don't know. The Super Hornet is getting even better. The Navy is testing new conformal fuel tanks that will extend its range by 30%. New electronic warfare pods will give it even better jamming and detection capabilities. And integration with the MQ-25 Stingray drone refueler will allow it to operate hundreds of miles farther from the carrier than ever before. Our enemies are watching all of this, and they know they can't keep up. That's why they resort to propaganda and threats. But when it comes to actual capability, America is decades ahead. Conclusion. So there you have it. 5 weapons that are operational right now on U.S. aircraft carriers. The AIM-174B Gunslinger with its 300-mile reach. The F-35C Lightning II carrying stealth cruise missiles. The RIM-116 rolling airframe missile defending against incoming threats. The Evolved Sea Sparrow missile providing layered defense. And the Super Hornet Block 3, the most versatile fighter jet on the planet. These aren't concept weapons. These aren't prototypes sitting in a lab somewhere. These are real systems, mounted on real aircraft, deployed on real carriers, operating in real combat zones right now. The men and women of the U.S. Navy train every single day to operate these systems. They run drills, they study, they prepare, and when the time comes, they execute flawlessly. That's what makes our military the best in the world. Not just the technology, but the people behind it. China can build all the carriers they want. Russia can threaten all they like. But they don't have what we have. They don't have the experience, the training, or the technology. And that's why America's aircraft carriers remain the most powerful weapons on the planet. If you found this information valuable, smash that like button.
The U.S. aircraft carrier is not just a ship. It is a floating city of war, a technological marvel, and a symbol of American naval dominance. The size, power, and reach of these massive vessels enable the United States Navy to maintain unparalleled control over the seas, ensuring that no other nation can challenge its supremacy on the water. At more than 1,000 feet long and weighing over 100,000 tons, the U.S. aircraft carrier is a true giant. But its real power comes from what it carries: fighter jets, advanced weapon systems, early warning aircraft, and a crew of over 5,000 sailors. This floating fortress can carry up to 90 aircraft, providing the U.S. military with a formidable air power platform that can operate anywhere in the world. But how does the U.S. Navy use this incredible power to control the oceans? The answer lies in the Carrier Strike Group, a fleet of ships surrounding the aircraft carrier, including destroyers, cruisers, and submarines. Together, these ships create a formidable force capable of dominating any region of the world, from the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea, projecting power, influence, and military might. One of the primary reasons that U.S. aircraft carriers are so powerful is their mobility. Unlike land-based air forces, an aircraft carrier can operate anywhere in the world's oceans. This mobility allows the U.S. to respond quickly to crises, conduct airstrikes, enforce no-fly zones, and provide humanitarian aid, without relying on foreign bases or permission from other nations. Whether it's a humanitarian mission or military intervention, the presence of a U.S. aircraft carrier sends a clear message. The U.S. is ready, able, and willing to act, no matter where the threat emerges. Perhaps the most important role of the aircraft carrier is its ability to maintain air superiority. In modern warfare, control of the skies is often the deciding factor between victory and defeat. The fighter jets launched from U.S. aircraft carriers, such as the F/A-18 Hornet or F-35 Lightning II, are among the most advanced in the world. They can engage enemy aircraft, defend against missile threats, provide close air support for ground forces, and strike targets deep behind enemy lines, all from the deck of the aircraft carrier. But air superiority isn't just about fighter jets. U.S. aircraft carriers also deploy early warning and surveillance planes, such as the E-2C Hawkeye. These aircraft provide 360-degree coverage, scanning for potential threats over vast areas, and ensuring that the carrier group can detect and neutralize any dangers long before they get close. The stealth capabilities of the aircraft, like the F-35, are also crucial to maintaining control of the air. These fighters can infiltrate enemy airspace without being detected, allowing them to strike high-value targets with precision. This combination of stealth, speed, and firepower makes the U.S. Carrier Strike Group an undefeated force in modern combat. The power of U.S. aircraft carriers is not just in their ability to wage war. They are also essential tools for global diplomacy. Their presence alone can influence international relations, enforce trade routes, and ensure the stability of key regions around the world. In the case of a conflict or a national emergency, the mere presence of a carrier can deter aggression, create stability, and reassure allies. One of the most impressive features of aircraft carriers is their long-term sustainability. While other military assets require constant resupply or return to base, the aircraft carrier is a self-sustaining force. It carries enough fuel, ammunition, food, and medical supplies to operate independently for months at a time. And when it needs replenishment, the U.S. Navy has a network of supply ships and logistics systems to keep the carrier operating at full capacity. This allows the U.S. Navy to maintain a constant presence in any region of the world. Aircraft carriers also serve as strategic deterrents. In times of heightened tension or conflict, the U.S. can deploy a carrier group to a region, showcasing its military strength and sending a powerful message to adversaries. America is here. The very existence of these floating fortresses prevents potential conflicts from escalating, offering a stable presence in areas where tensions might otherwise boil over. But despite their dominance, U.S. aircraft carriers are not without their vulnerabilities. As advanced as they are still susceptible to modern anti-ship missiles, submarines, and high-tech electronic warfare. In response to these threats, the U.S. Navy has invested heavily in defensive systems, including Phalanx CIWs, close-in weapon system, advanced radar technology, and electronic countermeasures, making the carriers one of the most well-defended assets in the world. The Ford-class carriers, the newest generation of U.S. aircraft carriers, are pushing the boundaries of military technology even further. With improvements in electromagnetic catapults, advanced radar systems, and more efficient aircraft operations, the Ford-class carriers are designed to carry out operations with greater speed, precision, and reliability. The future of U.S. aircraft carriers looks promising as they continue to evolve to meet new challenges in a rapidly changing world. Whether facing adversaries with advanced missile systems, new technologies, or unconventional threats, the U.S. Navy is committed to keeping its aircraft carriers at the forefront of naval power. These ships will continue to serve as the backbone of America's global military presence, ensuring that U.S. influence is felt across every ocean and in every part of the world. U.S. aircraft carriers are more than just symbols of military power. They are integral to America's global strategic dominance, offering unparalleled power projection and ensuring that the U.S. Navy can maintain control over the world's oceans.
There was no explosion, no casualties, no shots fired. And yet, global attention briefly focused on a small incident in a sensitive region. An Iranian drone was reported to have flown close to a United States aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln. There was no collision, no emergency alert, no visible escalation. Only one fundamental question remained. Was this a provocation, or was it something else entirely? Because in modern geopolitics, power is not always expressed through force. Very often, power is demonstrated through the ability to stop precisely at the limit. Iran presented its claim openly. One of its drones approached a U.S. aircraft carrier. There was no claim of attack, no claim of weapons lock, no claim of damage. This distinction matters. In military language, every word carries weight. Approach is not attack. Observation is not threat. And to this day, there is no evidence of any form of combat engagement. This was not a military crisis. It was a controlled and limited interaction. Iran did not act recklessly. What Iran demonstrated was the result of long experience operating under sustained military pressure. The drone involved was not a symbol of panic. It was a deliberately chosen instrument. Low cost, controlled risk, high strategic visibility. Iran understands the terrain, understands international law, understands escalation thresholds. The drone operated in legally permissible airspace at a calculated distance for a limited duration. This was not impulsive courage. It was disciplined confidence. Many states can strike. Far fewer can approach and stop at exactly the right moment. Iran was not seeking war. Its messaging has been consistent. The presence of foreign aircraft carriers in sensitive regional waters does not automatically produce stability. But note the emphasis. If attacked, Iran will respond. If not, Iran will exercise restraint. This is not emotional rhetoric. It is a defensive strategic doctrine. Iran is conveying a clear position. We are present. We are aware. We are not passive. But we are also not reckless. In an increasingly volatile world, the capacity for restraint is a rare form of strength. The United States did not respond aggressively. There was no emergency address, no escalation in rhetoric. Official statements were brief, standardized, technical, routine operations, international waters, situation under control. This response can be read in two ways. First, Washington did not perceive a direct threat. Second, any strong response would have acknowledged the effectiveness of Iran's signal. In geopolitics, silence is not always voluntary. Sometimes, silence is the safest response available. Beyond the region, Russia interpreted the incident through a different lens, not as Iranian provocation, but as a predictable outcome of heavy military presence near sensitive zones. Russia's approach has been consistent. Stability is not created by ever larger symbols of force moving closer to contested areas. Stability emerges from recognizing limits of influence. In many crises, Russia has chosen to lower the temperature, not raise it. And in this context, Russia views Iran as a regional actor operating with calculation, not emotion. If Iran's actions had crossed a critical threshold, the global response would have been immediate. But it was not. There was no emergency UN session, no coordinated condemnation, no new sanctions. Europe remained silent. China called for stability. Gulf states maintained distance. This silence was not accidental. It reflects a tacit recognition that Iran's actions did not exceed accepted limits. In international politics, the absence of reaction is often the clearest form of judgment. Public narratives tend to compress complexity. One drone becomes an attack. One claim becomes a crisis. Military reality is calmer. Iran did not alter the balance through force. Iran reminded all parties that the balance exists, and it did so without a single shot fired. This incident is not about who is the bravest, nor about who is the strongest. It is about how power is exercised without breaking equilibrium. Iran demonstrated presence without aggression. The United States demonstrated restraint, whether by choice or necessity. And the international community chose not to escalate the narrative. This is where we pause and think together. Is global stability really built by deploying ever more aircraft carriers? Or is it sustained through boundary recognition, self-restraint, and rational regional actors? Not every answer must be shared. What matters is that the questions remain open. If you find value in analysis like this, measured, critical, and free from emotional reflex, support this channel by subscribing, by sharing, and by engaging in thoughtful discussion in the comments. Because geopolitics is too serious to be reduced to noise. And finally, a brief disclaimer. This video is intended for analytical and educational purposes only. It is not designed to incite hostility, not to promote conflict, and not to target any nation or people. All assessments are based on publicly available information and strategic interpretation, which may evolve as circumstances change.
The night sky over the Persian Gulf hung thick and dark, a blanket of black that seemed to swallow everything within it. At Shahid Dastgab Air Base in southern Iran, the radar operators sat hunched over their glowing screens, eyes fixed on the green pixelated landscape that stretched across their monitors. It was 0200 hours, the dead of night when most of the world slept, but for these men, sleep was a luxury they could not afford. Their job was to see the unseen, to detect the approach of aircraft long before they could be heard or witnessed by the naked eye. It was a responsibility that weighed heavily on their shoulders, a burden they carried with the knowledge that any mistake could have catastrophic consequences for their nation. The night shift supervisor, Colonel Reza Ahmadi, was a veteran of 23 years in the Iranian Air Defense Command. He had seen conflicts come and go, had experienced the technical arms race that characterized modern military operations, and had always prided himself on the vigilance of his unit. His team was composed of the best radar operators in the entire Iranian military, men who had trained for years to detect even the most sophisticated military aircraft. Yet tonight, something felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a tension that Ahmadi could sense even if he couldn't quite articulate it. He walked among the banks of monitors, his weathered hands clasped behind his back, his eyes from screen to screen with practiced efficiency. "Status report," Ahmadi commanded, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the equipment that filled the operations center. The younger operators quickly snapped to attention, their fingers flying across keyboards and their voices overlapping as they reported the data streaming in from the various radar installations scattered across Iranian territory. The skies, it seemed, were clear. No contacts, no returns that indicated aircraft movement. The Persian Gulf had been quiet for weeks now, and there was a sense among the lower-ranking personnel that tonight would be no different from any other night. But Ahmadi knew better. He had been in this business long enough to understand that in military operations, silence was often the prelude to something significant. Across the Persian Gulf, nearly 200 miles to the east, the American military was executing a mission of extraordinary sophistication and strategic importance. At an undisclosed location, 4 F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters sat on the runway, their pilot performing pre-flight checks with the precision of surgeons preparing for a critical operation. These were not ordinary aircraft. The F-35, with its distinctive angular design and radar-absorbing composite materials, represented the cutting edge of modern military aviation technology. It was a platform that had cost billions of dollars to develop, had encountered years of technical challenges and cost overruns, and yet now stood as the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world, capable of operations that would have been considered science fiction just 2 decades earlier. The
Welcome to the War Archive, where wars become stories. For decades, aircraft carriers have symbolized something close to certainty. They are floating cities of steel, surrounded by destroyers, radar, and aircraft, projecting American power across the oceans. Their presence alone is meant to reassure allies and discourage challengers before a single shot is fired. Yet in quiet war games conducted by the U.S. Navy itself, aircraft carriers do not always dominate the opening phase of a conflict. Not because they are poorly designed, but because modern warfare no longer rewards size and firepower alone. It rewards disruption, ambiguity, and the ability to strike without clear warning. Imagine a calm stretch of water in the Persian Gulf. Civilian cargo ships move slowly through narrow shipping lanes, indistinguishable from the constant flow of global trade. Everything appears ordinary, until a container door opens, and a missile emerges from a vessel that was never meant to be part of a battle. This moment captures the logic behind Iran's entire strategy. Tehran does not intend to confront the United States ship for ship in a conventional naval fight it cannot win. Instead, it seeks to blur the line between peace and conflict, turning routine movement into potential threat. Iran does not need to sink an aircraft carrier to alter the balance of power. It only needs to make the Gulf feel uncertain, a place where hesitation replaces confidence. And once that certainty breaks, even the strongest navy in the world is forced to slow down, reassess, and operate on unfamiliar terms. Iran's approach to war was not born from confidence, but from constraint. Decades of sanctions, technological isolation, and the experience of fighting a larger enemy during the Iran-Iraq War taught Tehran a hard reality. It would never match the United States in ships, aircraft, or spending. Survival demanded a different way of thinking. Instead of pursuing symmetry, Iran embraced imbalance. Asymmetric warfare became a doctrine focused on exploiting the weak points of stronger opponents: logistics, predictability, and political tolerance for risk. The goal is not to defeat American forces outright, but to make their advantages difficult to use. The Persian Gulf magnifies this logic. It is narrow, shallow, crowded with civilian traffic, and politically sensitive, compressing reaction time and blurring the boundary between civilian and military space. In such conditions, even a small disruption can force an outsized response. Iran's strategy operates in the space below full-scale war. It aims to impose uncertainty without triggering immediate escalation, to raise the cost of presence rather than challenge it directly. In that gray zone, where clarity fades and risk multiplies, asymmetric warfare becomes not just effective, but decisive. Iran's most visible naval tactic relies on numbers rather than firepower. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy operates hundreds of small, fast attack boats, inexpensive, lightly armored, and easy to replace. Individually, they pose little threat. Moving together, they are designed to overwhelm. The logic of the swarm is unforgiving. A U.S. destroyer can track and engage a limited number of targets with precision, but dozens of fast-moving boats approaching from multiple directions compress reaction time to seconds. Rockets, machine guns, and anti-ship missiles are fired not to destroy immediately, but to saturate defenses. On radar screens, the swarm appears as a flood of small contacts spreading across the display. Defensive systems must track, classify, and prioritize each target in real time. When too many threats appear at once, the system is not defeated. It is overloaded, forced to choose what to stop and what to let through. For the crews on deck, the pressure is intense. High-speed boats closing from every angle turn open water into a confined arena where hesitation can be fatal. In that chaos, Iran does not need perfect execution, only enough confusion to open the door for the next phase of the attack. If the swarm is designed to overwhelm the senses, Iran's next weapon works through silence. Naval mines do not chase targets or announce their presence. They wait. In the confined waters of the Strait of Hormuz, that waiting becomes a powerful form of control. The strait is one of the world's most critical maritime choke points, a narrow passage through which a significant share of global oil exports must pass each day. Iran maintains thousands of naval mines, ranging from simple contact devices to more advanced types capable of detecting specific acoustic signatures. Their purpose is not dramatic destruction, but the denial of confidence. History shows how effective this can be. In 1988, a single Iranian naval mine nearly sank the U.S. frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts, ripping a massive hole in its hull and injuring its crew. The ship survived, but the incident proved that a weapon costing a few $1,000s could cripple a warship worth hundreds of millions. Mines can be deployed quietly by small boats, submarines, or vessels disguised as civilian traffic, then left behind. The real damage begins afterward, when every ship must slow, reroute, or wait, while clearance operations move forward at a deliberate pace. Even the suspicion of mines is often enough to disrupt shipping, turning the strait itself into a question mark the world cannot ignore. Beyond the water's edge, Iran's most reliable advantage is the land itself. The southern coastline is rugged, mountainous, and deeply familiar to those who defend it, terrain that offers concealment, mobility, and countless firing positions. In this landscape, missiles do not need to dominate the sea, they only need to reach it. Iran has built a network of mobile coastal missile batteries designed to appear briefly, fire, and disappear. Mounted on trucks and operated by small crews, these systems rely on shoot-and-scoot tactics, relocating within minutes to avoid counterstrikes. Every stretch of coastline becomes a potential launch point, and no fixed position can be assumed safe. From the deck of an American ship, the Gulf feels compressed and unforgiving. Warning times shrink to moments, leaving little room for maneuver or error. Defensive systems become reactive shields rather than guarantees, responding to threats that emerge suddenly from land. In this environment, the coast itself becomes a weapon. Naval power optimized for open oceans is drawn into a confined arena where proximity favors the defender. The result is not a single decisive blow, but a steady erosion of freedom, each transit shadowed by the knowledge that the shoreline is watching. Beneath the surface of the Persian Gulf lies a threat that is easy to underestimate and difficult to counter. The water here is shallow, warm, and filled with background noise from shipping and coastal activity, conditions that complicate sonar detection. What restricts large nuclear submarines instead favors smaller, quieter ones. Iran has invested in diesel-electric mini-submarines designed specifically for these waters. Compact and low signature, they can rest motionless on the seafloor, blending into the acoustic clutter of the Gulf. In this role, they do not patrol aggressively. They wait. An ambush from below compresses reaction time to seconds. A torpedo launched at close range is not intended to sink a ship in spectacular fashion, but to damage propulsion, steering, or critical systems. Even a single hit can force a vessel to withdraw, turning presence into vulnerability. The psychological impact is immediate. When the threat cannot be seen, every movement becomes cautious and deliberate. The Gulf shifts from a transit route into an ambush corridor, where danger may already be waiting in silence beneath the hull. Iran's strategy does not depend on the dramatic image of an aircraft carrier sinking beneath the waves. Destroying one outright would cross a political threshold that risks uncontrollable escalation. Instead, the objective is more calculated: to make the carrier ineffective. An aircraft carrier's true power lies in its flight deck, its sensors, and its freedom to maneuver. Damage the deck, disrupt radar, or impair propulsion, and that power collapses quickly. Even temporary degradation can halt flight operations, grounding aircraft and breaking the rhythm of sustained air dominance. From Iran's perspective, perfection is unnecessary. A small fraction of missiles or torpedoes penetrating layered defenses can be enough to force a carrier strike group into withdrawal. The moment a carrier must focus on protecting itself rather than projecting power, the strategic equation begins to shift. The symbolic cost matters as much as the physical damage. Aircraft carriers are meant to signal certainty and control simply by being present. When that presence falters, even briefly, it communicates a dangerous truth. Supremacy at sea is conditional, and in the Gulf, it can be challenged without sinking a single ship. If missiles and submarines threaten the hull, drones aim for something even more fragile: awareness. Over the past decade, Iran has invested heavily in unmanned aerial systems, not to dominate the air, but to erode the ability of its enemies to see and coordinate. In modern naval warfare, information often matters more than firepower. Iran's drones would likely arrive in layered waves, mixing surveillance platforms with loitering munitions. Some are meant to be obvious, drawing fire and revealing radar coverage and response patterns. Others are designed to slip through, striking radar arrays, communication antennas, and flight deck equipment that keeps a carrier group synchronized. The imbalance is intentional. A relatively inexpensive drone can force the launch of an interceptor missile costing many times more, slowly draining defensive magazines. Even minor damage to sensors can leave powerful ships operating with incomplete information, reacting rather than anticipating. Once awareness degrades, every other threat becomes more dangerous. Missiles arrive with less warning, submarines gain freedom of movement, and swarms exploit hesitation. In this layered strategy, drones are not the final blow. They are the fracture that makes all other attacks harder to stop. Naval power at sea depends on infrastructure on land. Every aircraft launched, every missile fired, and every ship sustained relies on a network of airbases, ports, fuel depots, and command centers spread across the Gulf. Iran understands that if this backbone is weakened, even the strongest fleet begins to slow. Tehran possesses the largest ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East, placing key U.S. facilities within range. Bases in Qatar, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Iraq, and Kuwait are fixed targets. Runways cannot move, fuel tanks cannot hide, and command centers must remain connected to function at all. The objective is not annihilation, but disruption. Strikes against runways, aircraft shelters, fuel storage, and logistics nodes can sharply reduce sortie rates and delay reinforcements. Even limited damage forces commanders to shift focus from sustained operations to defense and repair. If carriers cannot be resupplied and aircraft cannot operate at full tempo, naval superiority becomes theoretical. By pushing the fight onto land, Iran targets the system that enables American power, turning distant support hubs into frontline vulnerabilities. To be clear, the United States is not defenseless in the Gulf. Carrier strike groups are protected by layered systems, advanced radar, the Aegis combat system, electronic warfare, and interceptor missiles designed to detect and destroy incoming threats. In controlled conditions, many attacks can be identified and stopped before they ever reach a ship. The problem is not capability, but volume. When missiles, drones, boats, and submarines operate simultaneously from different directions, even the most advanced defenses face saturation. Defensive systems must prioritize in real time, choosing which threats to engage first and which to accept risk against. This is where psychology becomes as important as technology. Each interception expends ammunition, drains attention, and compresses decision-making windows. Over time, the pressure forces commanders to slow operations, conserve resources, and reassess exposure, all without suffering catastrophic losses. For Iran, this balance is intentional. The aim is to impose cost while staying below the threshold of total war, applying pressure without triggering an overwhelming response. Escalation control becomes a strategy in itself, shaping behavior through uncertainty rather than decisive confrontation. Iran's strategy rarely operates in isolation. One of its greatest advantages is the ability to widen a conflict without formally expanding it, using allied groups and proxy forces positioned across the region. This network allows pressure to be applied from multiple directions while maintaining ambiguity over responsibility. From Iraq to Yemen, proxy forces give Iran strategic depth. Drone launches, missile strikes, and maritime harassment can originate far from Iranian territory, stretching U.S. defenses and complicating response options. Each additional front forces American planners to divide attention, resources, and political focus. This approach turns geography into a multiplier. Shipping lanes in the Red Sea, bases near Iran's western border, and political stability within partner states all become interconnected pressure points. The battlefield grows wider without a declaration of war, transforming localized tension into a regional problem. By spreading friction instead of concentrating force, Iran seeks to exhaust rather than overwhelm. Control becomes fragile everywhere at once, and resolution grows more complex with every new front, a slow expansion of risk designed to favor endurance over decisive victory. Taken together, these tactics reveal a strategy that is often misunderstood. Iran is not preparing for a decisive naval victory, nor is it seeking to defeat the United States in a conventional sense. Its objective is narrower, quieter, and far more achievable: to make the Persian Gulf a place where American power cannot operate freely. Every swarm, mine, missile, drone, and proxy action feeds into the same outcome: uncertainty. When commanders cannot guarantee safe passage, when bases and logistics are under constant threat, and when every deployment carries political and economic risk, superiority begins to lose its practical meaning. Power that must always defend itself becomes power constrained. In such an environment, even the world's most capable navy is forced to slow down. Operations become cautious, allies grow uneasy, and markets react faster than diplomacy can stabilize them. The cost of staying starts to rival the cost of leaving, and control becomes a question rather than an assumption. This is the quiet danger of asymmetric warfare. It does not arrive with a single catastrophic moment, but with the steady erosion of confidence over time. In the narrow waters of the Gulf, Iran does not need to sink an aircraft carrier to change the balance of power. It only needs to make the sea feel unsafe.
For the last 10 days, if you knew where to look on a civilian tracking app, you could watch a giant move across the map. A 100,000-ton icon of American power steadily streaming west from the Strait of Malacca. That would be the USS Abraham Lincoln, a Nimitz-class nuclear supercarrier carrying 90 aircraft and 5,000 sailors. It's kind of hard to miss. But as of 48 hours ago, the Lincoln is gone. Welcome back. As of the recording of this video, it is late January 2026, and the most powerful warship currently deployed by the United States Navy has officially entered ghost mode. Now, ships, even warships, usually keep their automatic identification system or AIS transponders turned on while in transit. It's done for safety to avoid collisions in crowded shipping lanes. When a carrier deliberately cuts that signal while heading toward a conflict zone, it's not a glitch, it's a statement. To understand why they pulled the plug, we have to look at where they are going. Iran is currently experiencing its most violent internal upheaval in decades, following the brutally suppressed protests of January 8th and 9th, where reports indicate that thousands of demonstrators were unalived by IRGC forces. The geopolitical temperature has snapped the thermometer. President Trump didn't mince words when he ordered this deployment 2 weeks ago. He called this strike group an armada. Now, let's be clear about something. You don't send an armada just to patrol, and you don't turn off your transponders if you're just there to show the flag. By going dark, the Pentagon has shifted the Lincoln from a diplomatic tool to a tactical weapon. They're moving into what the Navy calls MCON, or emission control. Let's be clear, they're not just hiding from commercial tracking apps. They're attempting to deny the Iranian military a fixed targeting solution for their long-range coastal missiles. So what this comes down to is this: a supercarrier vanishing from the map in the Indian Ocean usually means one thing. It's positioning itself for a potential day one strike operation. And right now, Tehran has no idea exactly where the hammer is going to fall. Ghost mode and the Pacific Sprint. In naval warfare, your greatest strength is also your greatest vulnerability. A supercarrier is a floating city that virtually screams electronically. It broadcasts